Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. This is the 6th episode of story in which the third Hokage finally resolves to do something about Naruto's treatment, and he seeks the assistance of someone known for influencing things from the shadows. When Naruto has everything he needs, including an elder brother who will do anything to protect him, what could possibly go wrong? Please subscribe and smash the like button. Now, let's jump right in.
Things were going terribly. That was how Naruto thought of his current situation as he was yet again forced to flash away from a skull-shattering punch, courtesy of an incredibly enraged Jinchuriki. Dodging by normal means was proven redundant as soon as she entered the two-tailed state. Naruto even had the cracked ribs to attest to how useless it was to try matching the girl's speed naturally. Luckily, those bones were already close being completely healed, and he had learned from his mistake. Suiten, liquid bullet jutsu, the Jinchuriki said before spitting out a large ball of water that flew straight towards Izo, who up until now had been content with watching from the sidelines. Izo sighed and made a simple hand gesture towards the water bullet, making it freeze mid-flight. With as little effort as possible, he reared his fist back and drove it forward into the now large ball of ice, shattering it into hundreds of pieces. Naruto used this time to start weaving through his own hand seals while the girl growled at how easily her jutsu was put down. She ran at Izo with clear intentions of killing him first, but skidded to a halt when the older teen disappeared. Futon, great breakthrough, Naruto said quietly as he flared his chakra. A powerful and very direct gust of wind plowed through the forest and into the Jinchuriki, sending the girl flying into a tree several feet away from where she stood. The girl's body tore through the trees drunk with little resistance before she was dropped carelessly to the dirt. Since she was in her Baijiu cloak, the short flight didn't really injure her. At most, she would have some major bruising. Stumbling back to her feet, the girl glared hatefully at Naruto and ran at him. As she went, a long sword of water simply formed out of nowhere into hand. The blonde Jinchuriki narrowed his eyes and quickly drew his own sword. Gripping its hilt tightly, he made a wide horizontal sweeping slice and sent a long arc of wind at the girl. She faltered slightly in her charge as she brought her water blade up to block the arc of wind, only for it to carve right through her sword and knock her back off her feet. As soon as she hit the ground, she was forced to roll out of the way of a downward arc of wind that proved to be much sharper than the previous one. She rolled back into a crouched position and brought up her arm, effectively blocking the kick that Naruto tried to deliver to her head. She winced slightly at the force behind the attack but was otherwise unfazed. With the little amount of Kyuubi's chakra that Naruto had in his system, his physical prowess had increased slightly, though not near her level. She quickly latched onto his leg and skewered what remained of her water blade through Naruto's stomach, only for him to burst into smoke. A growl escaped her throat as she turned to glare at two other Narutos. The boy's clones were really starting to piss her off. She grit her teeth as she channeled a little more of the Nanabi's power, the foul chakra slowly burning her insides as it grew. "You really shouldn't do that," Izo chided lightly as he reappeared a few feet from her. "Channel too much of that stuff and we won't be able to do this easily," the girl growled at him. "I won't give up that easily. I refuse to be killed by you people," Izo sighed. "We aren't here to kill you, girl," he said tiredly. "Lies. You all lie, always trying to trick me. I won't let you get rid of me." She screamed as she leapt to her feet and lashed her right arm out at him in a heavily chakra-infused punch. A loud shockwave shook the area as her punch was stopped dead by Izo's open left hand, his arm barely straining against the force. He clasped his hand over hers and threw his right leg hard into her ribs. To her credit, the girl barely lost her breath before wrapping her left arm around his leg, trapping him there, and sending one of her two chakra tails over her right shoulder and into his stomach. The resulting impact sent Izo skidding across the ground until he hit a tree. Before the girl could even think about continuing her assault on the blindfolded boy, she leapt into the air to avoid the slash of Naruto's sword that threatened to cleave her in half. As she was in the air, her chakra cloak receded rapidly before two large bug-like wings sprouted from her back and started to beat quickly. Her new appendages, as intended, gave her the sudden ability to stay airborne as she gazed down angrily at the blonde. "Hyoton, shattering ice spears," Izo exclaimed angrily, forcing a cluster of huge ice spears to erupt from the ground and up towards the girl. Despite the size of the jutsu, ground-to-air attacks usually had a bad record of being effective against a target that could fly around freely. Needless to say, the girl was able to very easily avoid even the tallest of the ice spears. She was, however, quite impressed by the jutsu itself and slightly curious about the whole prospect of the ice element. The girl didn't linger on those thoughts for long, and returned to glaring at the boys below her. Izo spat some blood to the side and growled, "You bitch. That broke like 3 fucking ribs," and ruptured my stomach. Do you have any idea how much chakra that's going to take to heal properly? He yelled in outrage. I'm gonna carve it all right out of your fucking skull. If the psychotic grin was anything to go by, he was actually serious. Izo. Calm down. If you can't control yourself against her, then go and deal with the others. We need this one alive, not them, Naruto said sternly. The older teen groaned and grabbed his head in frustration. Fine. I'll deal with the pests. But don't interrupt, I wanna have some fun this time. You can deal with the bug, he sighed irritably before leaping away towards the village. Naruto sighed as he turned back to the girl who had lowered herself back down to the ground. It seemed that she couldn't keep flying for long periods of time while the Baiju's chakra was interfering with her thoughts, if her labored breathing was any indication. The blonde was thankful that he wasn't being put at a complete disadvantage against the girl. He already had enough problems with Izo getting dangerously close to having another episode. If there was one thing worse than a raging Jinchuriki, it was a psycho Izo after he was injured. Another unfortunate thing that had not escaped his notice was the fact that there was another person watching the fight from a distance. Whoever it was didn't seem to be planning on interfering anytime soon, which probably just meant that they were waiting for him and the girl to wear each other out before making a move. A truly terrible plan to have against two Jinchuriki, even if one of them was using an unhealthy amount of unfiltered Baiju chakra. You still committed to killing me? He asked curiously. Yep, the girl replied simply. Damn, in a flash of red, that wasn't Naruto. The girl had crossed the distance between them and put her fist into and through the blonde's chest, only for him to burst into smoke, effectively killing the small sense of accomplishment that she had gained. Turning around, and grinding her teeth in frustration as she did, the girl was met with the bored stare of two Narutos. She knew a little bit about the shadow clone jutsu, not much but enough to have a minute understanding of how it worked, and she was slightly confident that the boy in front of her couldn't make any more. Only Jinchuriki could throw such hazardous amounts of chakra around without dying. The jutsu that he was using though was infuriating her beyond belief. The ability to simply jump to his weapons in a flash was something that she was having a tough time figuring out how to counter. The boy was obviously faster than she was when he was using it, not that she had seen him really try dodging without it, but she was confident that she was stronger. With the older of the two now gone for who knew what reason, the girl could proudly say that she was feeling lucky in regards to winning this fight. Alright Chome, just a little more and I think I can catch him off guard, she said to her tenant, who unlike her, was not so quick to go hostile. Phew. You have already reached your limit. Any more of my chakra will harm you and you know it. Have you even taken the time to consider if those boys are telling the truth? What if you are attacking them with no reason? The Nanabi asked sternly, its voice being noticeably feminine. The Baiju was not overly impressed by her host's actions thus far. Normally the young girl would not be so quick to violence, choosing to instead hide away somewhere, but today had not been the most pleasant of days and Fu was more or less in a mood. The Nanabi was incredibly displeased at the village people's treatment of her host, but she also couldn't completely blame them for their ignorance either. She and the other Baiju had a bad reputation amongst humans, and even the kind-hearted ones were hesitant to truly explain things to others. It would take far too many years for humans to figure out, on their own, that harming the Jinchuriki did very little to the beast within. Their stupidity was truly commendable. You said that the last time as well, Fu countered harshly. Chome flinched slightly within her seal. That was not her proudest moment, she hated to admit, but from within her confines there was very little she could safely assume about those on the outside. The girl's comment had reminded the Baiju of her careless mistake born from her far too opportunistic attitude, and she would be damned before she let something like it happen again. So, with that being said, the Baiju silently retreated further into her seal and allowed the girl to draw on a minuscule amount more of her chakra. Healing her host after this would be draining, but it would be better than the possible alternative. Fu felt the chakra flow into her as her completely orange eyes tried to glare a hole into the blonde boy. A small smirk found its way to her lips as she charged him in an explosion of speed. There was no way that he could find the time to use the jutsu to avoid her now. She reared back her fist and launched it forward with as much power as she possibly could without actually hurting herself, which she had done once or twice. The resulting boom and shockwave of the impact stopped her dead. Her smirk fell and her eyes widened as she continued to stare at the bored expression of the blonde who had yet to even react to her attack. Her eyes flickered to her fist, revealing that the blonde had caught it with apparently little effort. She could still see the strain of his muscles, but even that was nothing when taking the power of her hit into consideration. She winced slightly as he clasped his hand over hers harshly. Sorry about this. The blonde sighed. I can't play around here anymore. I do hope you can forgive me in time, he smiled sadly. Fu raised an eyebrow at the boy before the air was crushed out of her lungs by his fist. She attempted to quickly regain her breath, but something froze her, wrenching whatever hope there was of victory from her thoughts. That something was an aura of unmatched and unrivaled calm that made her feel powerless and useless. It surrounded her, filled her, became her, and forced the Nanabi's chakra back into the seal. Fu could honestly say that she had never felt so at ease, despite the sense of calm being obviously forced upon her. A searing pain in her stomach tore her out of the calmness. Looking down in shock, Fu was greeted with a long blood-covered bone-like blade sticking out of her middle. Glancing back up, she fully expected to see the blonde with some kind of smug expression or victorious smirk. What she got instead was an expression of shock that matched her own. A strong strike to the back of her head made her vision go blurry as her legs gave out from under her. The last thing she saw before everything went black was the blonde lunging over the top of her and at whoever was behind her. Izo absent-mindedly inspected his reflection in the clear water below him. He didn't react when a soft flute tune reached his ears, and he definitely didn't react when 4 people landed around him on the water. With a light sigh, he raised his head and looked around at them lazily. It was beyond unfair, ridiculously so. How in hell was one supposed to win against such overwhelming odds? How could one even be stupid enough to take on such odds? The answer he really didn't care about. It was not his fault that they had run so thick-headedly into his presence, nor was it his fault that there was only 4 of them. Honestly, what were they thinking, challenging him with such pitiful numbers? He shook his head at those thoughts. They were only children after all, they could not be blamed for their master's mistakes in teaching them. The worst part was that Orochimaru had probably convinced them that their strength was far more than it was for the sake of having overconfident and slightly suicidal shinobi. "Hey, Tuya, what exactly is your genjutsu supposed to do again?" Jirobo asked curiously, as he studied the apparently uncaring teen before them. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to make him fall asleep. I was trying to deal with this quickly so we could go watch Kimimaro kick Blondie's ass. The redhead shrugged. For all I know, the guy could currently be having the equivalent to an insane high. Your skills are oh so valued amongst our numbers, Kitamaru said sarcastically. Oh fuck you, you 6-armed freak. Too bad no girl will ever want you to touch her. With that many arms, I'm sure you could have made a killing giving massages. Everyone actively ignored Tuya's slightly dreamy expression. You 4 do realize I can still hear you, right? I'm blind, not deaf, Izo drawled. Yeah, we don't care. Trash like you never put up much of a fight anyway, so we'll just take our time with you, Sakan said, the other 3 nodding enthusiastically at his words. I feel insulted. I really, truly do, Izo said dryly. However, it appears as though good old Orochimaru has become a little too lenient in his old age. Allowing brats like you to come after me is humorous, almost to the point that I am struggling to contain my glee. He calmly placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. Then again, I'm feeling particularly twitchy after what that bitch did to me before, so I think I'll just settle for flaying you bastards, he growled. The Sound 4 were a little put off by the teen's rather sudden switch between bored and aggressive, but they were still overly cocky and didn't think much of it at the time. They all narrowed their eyes when the blindfolded boy began to release his chakra. The disturbing part of it was that even though they were aware of his chakra, and they could still see him quite clearly, they still couldn't sense him at all. Keeping that in mind, the 4-sound ninja quickly went to focusing on his chakra to keep some form of eye on him. That was when they really started to sweat. His chakra was sickening. It was thick, potent, and foul in every sense of the word. Each of the 4 instantly found it disturbingly similar to that of Orochimaru's chakra, only it seemed far more focused and dense. That wasn't saying that they were putting Izo in the same league as the Snake Sanin, because they really weren't. No, all they were doing was realizing just why Orochimaru wanted the guy captured. They were also subconsciously rethinking their chances against him. The disturbing sound of scraping metal resounded throughout the clear area over the large lake as Izo slowly drew his sword. The blade of the long Chokudo-style blade was pitch black but somehow still shiny to a certain extent. The 5 shinobi all remained perfectly still for a few moments after that, until the water around Izo suddenly exploded. Gakidamaru grunted as he was seemingly swatted away with a large gash on his side. Izo reappeared and charged straight for Jirobo, a crazed grin etched on his face. Tuya began to play a melody on her flute while Sakan and Ukon went to intercept Izo. They reached him quickly and stabbed at him with a kunai only for Izo to literally force himself into the small blade, making it pierce deep into his left shoulder. Sakan's eyes widened in surprise before Izo slammed the pommel of his sword into the side of his head, knocking him away as the older teen once again went charging towards Jirobo. The largest of the Sound 4 smirked as he quickly raised his arm and brought it crashing down onto Izo, sending the boy down into the water's depths. The water behind him erupted and formed into a large dragon that wrapped itself around him and latched its maw onto his shoulder before freezing solid and encasing the large boy in an icy prison of sorts. Izo resurfaced from the water with the same crazed grin on his face. He swiped his sword down to his side and sliced a water bullet clean in half as he turned to face a really pissed Sakon with a comical lump on his head. Bringing his arm up quickly, Izo blocked a punch from Kitamaru, who was now mostly covered in swirling markings and missing the gash that he had before. The six-armed boy lashed out with all of his arms in an attempt to hit Izo, but the older boy was able to effectively block or redirect each one, even if just barely. Sakon took the opening and went to attack from behind, throwing two kunai as he went. Izo suddenly struck Kitamaru in the throat and grabbed one of the boy's arms before spinning them around and making the younger boy take both kunai in the back. Using the spider-like Dean as a springboard, he kicked himself up and away from the close-by Sakon, only to stay floating in the air. The fighting paused momentarily as the Sound Four came to the ridiculous conclusion that Izo could fly. That was not exactly something that they were prepared for, nor were they really capable of fighting. A loud shattering sound made everyone turn to see Jirobo, now free from his ice confines and covered in markings of his own. Izo smiled cheerfully as he began weaving hand seals. "Thank Kami for that. I was afraid you would actually fail to entertain me." "Oh well, you've already made the biggest mistake of your shinobi careers," the blind teen said. "And what the fuck is that supposed to mean?" Tuya asked. She had temporarily given up on trying to catch the boy in a genjutsu. Izo gave the four a sharp-toothed grin. "Never follow someone to where they can fight better," he stated casually before flaring his chakra. Suten, hidden mist jutsu. The lake was instantly covered in a thick shroud of mist. Sakon, Ukon, and Kitamaru managed to stick together while Jirobo stayed by Tuya. They may not have liked each other, but they weren't stupid either. None of them knew how to properly fight against an opponent that could only be detected by sight, a sense which was now practically useless. "Now, let's see who I should kill first," Izo's disembodied voice said cheerfully. "Maybe I'll kill the fat one, take out the muscle of the group before I start picking off the rest of you. But then there's the spider one too, he could be fun, like pulling wings off a fly. The Siamese tranny brothers are best left till later, I don't want to touch them any more than I need to. The girl is rather cute, with red hair to boot. I do so love red hair," he whispered into the girl's ear, making her spin around to see absolutely nothing. Jirobo hissed in pain and grabbed his arm as blood flowed out from between his fingers. "Red blood works too though," the Uzumaki stated casually as he walked out of the mist and into their view. Tuya quickly put her flute to her lips and started playing a tune. Izo made a one-handed seal and the mist around her flute instantly condensed into it and froze. A second later, it shattered into pieces. The redhead stared at the crumbling remnants of her weapon, her hands shakily holding onto a few of the frozen pieces. Jirobo took this moment to awkwardly back away from his comrade. He was beyond aware of what would befall him should he get between the girl and her revenge. Smart boy that one. Izo very casually removed the kunai from his shoulder and began licking the blood from it, waiting patiently for something to happen. He was not disappointed when the girl cried out in rage and tried to mutilate his face with a kunai. Unfortunately, the redhead had not taken into account the fact that Izo was currently the equivalent of a highly delusional bloodthirsty maniac whose morals were directly dependent on his sense of humor. There was a very good fucking reason that he had made a stockpile of suppression seals for himself, and another reason entirely for why he gave them to Naruto. The kunai sliced cleanly through his throat with absolutely no resistance at all before he dispersed into mist. Tuya growled as she angrily swiped away the slightly thicker wisps of mist, only for said wisps to latch onto her arm and coil around the limb. Several more tendrils of mist shot out of the water below her and wrapped around her legs and waist. She tried to pull some of the tendrils off of her arm, but as soon as she touched them with her free hand, they latched onto that as well, quickly coiling up her other forearm. The tendrils of mist, which somehow were far more solid than they should have been, continued to coil around her limbs until they suddenly stopped and held her still. Normally, Tuya would have reacted in a more orderly fashion to such a situation, but the whole thing reminded her far too much of Orochimaru's snakes. After seeing what the Sannin was willing to do with his summons, she had developed a very well-hidden fear of snakes and anything resembling snakes. It wasn't the kind of fear that would send her cowering in a corner, but it did affect her train of thought and her ability to truly focus on the matter at hand. This was the exact reason that she, a genjutsu specialist, had not identified that she was trapped in an admittedly powerful genjutsu. Before the redhead could take a brief moment to calm herself down, the ends of each tendril of mist raised itself up off of her body, split into several small needle-pointed tendrils, and quickly dug themselves through her clothes and under her skin. The girl screamed in horror as she felt the mist crawl and squirm under her skin and force its way further into her body. She clenched her eyes shut and grit her teeth as she suffered through the most horrific experience she had been put through. Her face twisted into an expression of terror as a silent scream tore through the area. She could literally feel the tendrils digging in and coiling around her spine. Izo watched on in interest as black markings began rapidly spreading over the girl's body, her chakra increasing vastly at the same time. He would give her credit though, most had long since gone into shock when he used his more powerful genjutsu. The older teen quirked his head to the side as Tuya seemingly erupted with chakra, her hair growing slightly longer and gaining a more pinkish coloring while her skin darkened drastically. 5 horns sprouted from her head, shredding her hat, and forming into a crown of sorts. Izo had to admit, the transformation was actually quite appealing compared to what usually spawned from Orochimaru's cursed seals. The redhead released most of her suddenly much larger chakra reserves in one giant pulse, effectively shattering the genjutsu, but also leaving her near useless. Izo sighed as he was returned back to reality with the girl floating on the surface of the lake. She was still in her second stage cursed seal form, but it was obvious that it would do very little for her now. He sighed as he walked past the defeated girl. He didn't bother to acknowledge the girl's glare as he went, or her rapidly replenishing reserves. It would be more fun in the end if she were capable to help out the others anyway. Jirobo, from his place a few feet away, watched the blind boy cautiously. From his point of view, Tuya had simply run up to him before stopping suddenly, screaming in horror, then blasting through her cursed seal forms, before collapsing into the water. He knew what had happened, and it scared him a bit. Out of the entire group, including Kimimaro, Tuya was the most adept at genjutsu. For her to fall victim to one so easily was either a sign of her weakness, or a warning signal about their target. Considering that the blind teen had already proven to be unconcerned with getting injured physically, Jirobo guessed that it was a warning signal. Izo grinned happily, as he sauntered up to the large sound ninja. Despite his cheerful demeanor, the Uzumaki was actually considering the best way to take down the brute while also keeping things entertaining. That was when he realized that the 2, or rather 3, stronger members of the group had made a beeline for land and out of the mist. If there was anyone who could at least offer some fun for him, it would be those 2, or 3, he really had to find some way to correct that confusion. The younger of the 2 was already in the first stage of his cursed seal, so physical injuries wouldn't be quite as effective and they would eventually heal anyway. Even limbs would quickly regrow should the teen decide to go to stage 2 of the seal, and by that point things would just get repetitive and annoying. Izo just needed a way to put the fat one out of commission until he was done humbling the others, but still capable of rallying back up with his comrades for the grand finale. And so, with that in mind, Izo came to the one possible conclusion he could think of while in his not-so-sane state of mind. Cut off the boy's legs. Jirobo barely had time to process what had happened when his knees exploded in pain and blood and he collapsed down into the water, the otherwise blue liquid quickly becoming clouded with dark crimson. Izo cackled happily, as he skipped off to where he could sense the last of the group's members, and yes, he really was skipping. He paused suddenly and stared off in the direction that Naruto was in before shrugging and continuing on his way, leaving 2 possibly further traumatized children behind him. Death tag was infectiously fun. The sound of bone being cleaved cleanly in half was most unsettling to the albino sound ninja. His blade-like constructs were incredibly dense, even by his standards, so the concept of them breaking, let alone being sliced through, was preposterous. And yet here he was, fighting against the blonde Uzumaki, and having said blonde carved through his weapons like butter. The expression of rage on the younger boy's face made him realize that he must have crossed some sort of line when he took down the other Jinchuriki. The Kaguya was more than aware that Naruto was using an incredible amount of nature manipulation, more than likely with wind, to power up his otherwise plain katana. The amount of training such a feat would have required to master to such a point was commendable, and Kimimaro had respect for the boy's ability to manage it at such a young age. Truly, this boy would do well in service to Orochimaru, and the albino was going to make sure that he was delivered to his master. He bent back to avoid a wide arcing slash from the blonde before lunging forward in a stabbing motion. He wasn't aiming for anything vital, the boy was to be captured alive after all, but that didn't make the injury any less effective. What he was not counting on was for Naruto to do absolutely nothing to stop the bone construct, instead letting it skewer right through his stomach as he brought his own sword down to cleave Kimimaro in half. Said sound ninja was astounded to have actually found an apparently suicidal Konoha shinobi. Such a thing was thought to not actually exist. Good thing he wasn't aware of Izo, or Anko to a lesser extent when it concerned Orochimaru. Naruto brought his sword down onto the Kaguya with enough force and wind chakra to cut through even a version 2 Baijuo cloak. He and Danzo could attest to how difficult such a thing was. The sound of metal carving through bone echoed through the forest, but it wasn't quite as sudden as it should have been. Naruto grit his teeth as he put more force behind his blade in an effort to cut through the absurdly dense bone shield that the albino had formed from his arm. The katana had already cleaved a good 2/3 through it, but it had slowed down considerably now and was almost stopping completely. The blonde narrowed his eyes as Orochimaru's dedicated servant smirked slightly. With a flare of chakra, that wasn't all his own, Naruto pulsed the wind chakra around his sword and forced it to explode within the older boy's bone shield. The resulting eruption of power shattered the shield and knocked both boys away from each other. Naruto used this brief moment to pull out a small sealing scroll from his pouch and throw it high into the air. Making a one-handed seal and pulsing his chakra slightly, Naruto activated the scroll, which proceeded to unfurl in midair and spew out its contents all over the area below. It should also be noted that the stab wound in his stomach, along with all the scrapes from the small explosion, were steaming and healing themselves very rapidly. Kimimaro raised an eyebrow as dozens of elongated kunai rained down from the sky, all of them having some weird red sealing tag wrapped around their hilts. The sound ninja simply swatted away the ones that would have fell onto him, but kept a close eye on the blonde just in case. There had to be another use for the numerous weapons other than causing a rather ineffective rain of death. His assumptions were proven correct when the blonde disappeared in a flash of red and reappeared behind him with his katana skewered through the albino's middle. "Doesn't feel so good, does it?" Naruto growled. With a sharp twist, Naruto snapped the blade off and the older boy flashed to a kunai in front of him and delivering a powerful forward kick just under where the broken blade was protruding. Kimimaro was launched back into a tree, the length of blade protruding from his back stabbing into the large trunk and pinning him there. The Kaguya had to admit, had he have left the other four to deal with this one, they would definitely be dead by now. He was only surviving because of his Keke Genkai, and even then, he was finding it difficult to match the blonde in raw ferocity and killing ability. Spitting out some blood, the green-eyed boy forced himself forward and off of the blade. Reaching up, he pulled out another blade of bone from his elbow before coughing up some more blood. He fell to his knees in a coughing fit as he tried futilely to regain his composure. Gritting his teeth, and subsequently getting a mouthful of blood, the Kaguya channeled his chakra and activated his curse seal. The markings started to spread over him quickly, flooding him with much-needed chakra, before simply stopping dead. Kimimaro froze and his eyes widened as he observed the curse seal slowly receding back to his chest. He could feel it, the calming power that was forcing itself into his body and pushing his master's gift back into containment. Looking up in slight fear and rage, his eyes met the cold blue of Naruto as the blonde stared at him impassively. Somehow, the Jinchuriki was forcibly deactivating the curse seal while also ripping any thoughts of victory from his mind. It was as if the will of Kami herself was insisting him to surrender, and it was terrifyingly peaceful. His eyes widened as he shook his head, quickly forced his curse seal to once again spread over his body, but he didn't stop there. He pushed it further until the markings faded into his darkening skin, his white hair turning a dark gray, and his spine tearing itself out of his lower back to form a long tail. 6 large bone spikes protruded from his back as flesh began to form over his tail, the entire process making him resemble a dinosaur. Whether dinosaurs even existed in the history of the elemental nations is best left to later debate. Naruto was impressed, more so than he could express in words. For anyone who wasn't completely insane to actually overpower his technique like that was truly remarkable and quite irritating as well. The Will of Fire was a well-kept secret kinjutsu made by the Shodai Hokage. It was not something that could simply be learnt and used by anyone, but it was too powerful to risk anyone unfavorable managing to learn it. As of now, only 4 people alive knew about it, only 3 of them actually being able to use it, those 3 being Naruto, Izo, and the Sun Daime, with Danzo merely knowing of its existence. It was also the very thing that birthed the oh-so-famous motto of Konoha, not that anyone was allowed to know that. The kinjutsu was actually very simple. By focusing their chakra into very specific points of the body and then releasing it in very specific pulses, the user could manifest their very will into an overpowering sense that would invade the target. It was only really effective when facing a single opponent, as the sense would be diluted over multiple targets and required quite a bit of concentration, but it was still a highly effective way to end fights without violence. Since Naruto's will manifested into an overwhelming sense of calm, it only made things more easygoing. It was not uncommon for someone to be able to fight the technique, but since Hashirama had used it quite effectively against some of the Baiju'u, it was without a doubt surprising. Naruto personally liked to brush it off by saying that the Shodai was clearly far more stubborn than anyone else to live, hence his will was unbreakable, despite the Sandaimei's comments about Naruto being quite similar to the original Kami of Shinobi. Either way, Naruto was still impressed by Kimimara's ability to fight back against the technique, but not enough to ease the anger he had towards the other boy. Kimimaro used his new boost in power to force several sharp spikes of bone to erupt from the ground around Naruto and turn him into a pincushion, only for the blonde to burst into smoke, revealing a skewered log in his place. Pain exploded from his back as he was crushed to the ground hard enough to crack the earth under him. Glancing back quickly, he was met with a large glowing ball of swirling chakra that was obliterating the protrusions from his back, grinding them down until it reached his back and simply tore into his skin. Without warning, the ball collapsed into a smaller form and tore a good few inches into his back before completely dissipating, revealing Naruto above him with his hand held over where the sphere of chakra had been. In a flash of red, the blonde appeared in front of him with his hands in a seal. "Katen, Severance Stream," Naruto exclaimed, taking a deep breath before spewing out a highly condensed and accurate stream of burning white flame that sliced cleanly through the ground. The Kaguya managed to roll out of the line of fire, pun intended, but couldn't help but get burnt just from being so close to the white flame. The disturbing part of the jutsu was that the flames had died out instantly, leaving no sign of an actual fire aside from the cleanly cut line in the ground which was producing an excessive amount of steam. Kimimaro narrowed his eyes. Wasn't the Jinchuriki a wind affinity? Unfortunately, the older boy realized that he was not in fighting condition anymore. Sure, he still had enough chakra, and his curse seal was still going strong, but his injuries were starting to affect his thinking and slowing him down considerably. If he was still planning on defeating the blonde without outright killing him, he would need to find some time to recover. With the second level of his curse seal active, he would not need very long. And so he ran. Naruto watched the albino run away as fast as he could, which with his new form was not anywhere near as fast as he would normally be able to. The blonde knew that Kimimaro wasn't running away like a coward, but he also knew that giving the older boy the chance to recover even slightly was a terrible idea. The young Jinchuriki began to channel his chakra into his arm, condensing it and shaping it until golden globs of it began to protrude from his skin. He grinned as he outstretched his hand towards the fleeing Kaguya. He really owed his mother for writing down her techniques in scrolls for him. Kimimaro leapt suddenly to the right to avoid two long golden chains of chakra that shot past him and wrapped around a tree. He watched as they constricted violently until the tree was torn to splinters before the chains dissipated back into chakra. Jumping high, the boy twisted his body so he was facing the ground and threw his bone sword through one of the links of a third chain that had tried to grab him, pinning it to the ground and making it dissipate as well. His green eyes widened in realization as a fourth chain latched onto his leg and wrapped around it tightly. The Jinchuriki had lured him into the air for this exact purpose. The chain went taut and whipped to the side harshly, dragging the boy with it through the air and tearing him through several thick tree branches and even an actual tree trunk at one point. It quickly went loose and dropped him unceremoniously to the dirt before suddenly whipping up into the air. While he was high up in the air, suffering that momentary feeling of weightlessness, Kimimaro honestly admired the beauty of the world beneath him. Minus the blonde that was currently throwing him around like a yo-yo, of course. This admiration lasted approximately 2 seconds as the chain once again went taut and dragged him down to the earth at breakneck velocity, smashing him into the ground with enough force to create a small crater. The chain dissipated as Naruto calmly walked up the motionless sound Shinobi. He watched as the boy's skin began to pale more and his tail retracted back into him, all of the effects of the curse seal simply fading back into its origin on his chest. He would not be getting back up from that. Not after having to force his curse seal to activate the way he had, or after how much of his chakra Naruto had suppressed with his chakra chains. Even the blonde himself would be hard-pressed to keep going after something like that, using the Kyuubi's chakra in place of the curse seal. Naruto drew another kunai from his pouch and began channeling fire nature chakra into the small blade, causing it to glow a faint red. Focusing a little more, the blonde filled the fire chakra layer with his wind nature chakra, making the small blade suddenly burst into white-hot flames. Without hesitation, Naruto brought the small knife of fire down and straight into Kimimaro's chest, piercing his heart and killing him near instantly. Removing the kunai and cancelling his chakra flames, he made a quick hand seal and summoned a clone to seal away the boy's body while he went and checked on the other Jinchuriki. An explosion of chakra, combined with the immense pressure of killing intent, rocked through the forest. Naruto's breath was knocked out of him as a giant blur of red tackled into him and threw him further into the forest. Twisting himself in the air, the blonde managed to land on his feet and skid to a stop after a few feet. Looking up, the blonde was met with the crouched form of a three-tailed version 2 Baijuo cloak, one long tail sticking out behind it, and two smaller ones sticking out of its back like wings. Shitten with that, the beast roared and charged at him. Izo hummed a cheerful tune as he calmly stepped over the beaten and bruised body of Kitamaru. The spider-like Dean had transformed into his second stage curse seal form at some point in the battle, even summoning a giant spider as well, but it did little to help him in the end. He was currently lying on the ground with all of his arms and his legs tied securely behind his back, his spider summon having been long since sent back to wherever it came from. The worst part of his defeat, and the most humiliating, was that his limbs were bound by his own golden spider silk, that he may or may not have boasted about being as strong as metal. Kitamaru, although not unconscious, was not stupid enough to try and release himself and take on Izo by himself. After the boy had taken both him, Sakon, and Ukon out at the same time, he would admit that he didn't stand a chance alone. He would wait until Jirobo and Tuya finally found them, if they weren't dead already. The screams of horror and pain were leaning more to the possibility of them being dead by now. If Sakon and Ukon could get back up and find Kimimaro, then they would probably have a good chance of taking him down together. Speaking of Sakon and Ukon, the former Siamese twin things had been separated quite forcibly at the start of the fight, something about not knowing what number they represented in the group. They had both gone into their cursed seal forms and had both been absolutely destroyed. The crazy part of it all was that the three sound ninja were not playing around at all like they usually would, and they had been fighting at their strongest for most of the time. That didn't stop Izo from burying Sakon neck deep in the ground, and freezing Ukon to a tree, both far enough away from each other so as to not fuse back together. Izo stopped suddenly as there was yet another explosion of chakra from where he had left Naruto. With his sensing ability, that explosion had been the equivalent to a low-powered nuke. Whatever that was. Either way, the bright beacon for all to see had just become a raging inferno of beacons, all with the goal of drawing everyone's attention within a 10-mile radius. Sometimes he really questioned what his brother did in a past life to deserve such terrible luck from the gods. It was nearly impossible to go on a mission without something, somehow, going terribly wrong. On the plus side, he usually got to kill quite a few people on said missions, so he wouldn't complain. The blindfolded teen sighed. "Sorry guys, looks like my services are required elsewhere. Now remember, don't take candy from strangers, brush your teeth twice a day, and treat girls with respect. Do all that and I'm sure you can grow into fine men someday," he lectured happily. "Unless I kill you first." With an enthusiastic wave, the boy leapt off towards his brother's location, leaving the three other boys in silence. Kitamaru Sakon said emotionlessly. Yeah?" the spider boy asked. "We will never speak of this, understand? The others will be sworn to silence as well," Ukon stated calmly. "Yeah, that's cool with me." Kitamaru let out a deep breath and relaxed. "Hey, was it just me, or did that guy just run in the wrong direction?" "It's best not to think about it," the brothers said in unison. Naruto continued to flash from kunai to kunai, not daring to stop for any longer than he needed. The other Jinchuriki, or the Baijuo itself, was right on his heels the whole time. Turned out it could fly really fucking fast. If he did stop for too long, the thing would manage to catch and beat the living shit out of him. He was not strong enough to overpower the girl in this form. He couldn't even use his own Baijuo cloak, since that would just bring more absurd amounts of attention to the location. The blonde quickly flashed away as the Taki Jinchuriki dropped down onto where he had been, cracking and breaking the ground beneath it. Channeling his chakra, Naruto shot out several large golden chain that wrapped around the raging Jinchuriki. He grit his teeth slightly as he strained to maintain the chakra constructs against the Baijuo's chakra. This was proving to be far more difficult than when he had to do the same to Yagura, although to be fair, Yagura only had the Sanbi fueling him with chakra, not the Nanabi. Makuten, Reaper branch. Several large branches grew out of the ground around the barely restrained Jinchuriki, wrapping around its limbs and appendages as they went. The wood strained and groaned against the monstrous being before the three long and very sharp branches shot out of the ground in front of it and pierced into its chest. Naruto chakra chains were eaten away quickly until they all dissipated completely, while the Jinchuriki itself was quickly losing form. Its tail and wings were drained rapidly by the roots and branches, while the rest of the cloak began to thin out and retract back into the girl. As this was happening, the grass, trees, and other plant life around the area began to get much greener and flourished almost instantly. Several of the tree even grew quite larger in the process, making the small area stick out more amongst the rest of the forest. Eventually the entire Baijuo cloak was drained, leaving only the girl, who no longer had the stab wound through her stomach. The branches retracted back into the ground along with the ones restraining her. revealing that even where they had pierced the girl was completely healed. She fell to the ground unceremoniously, making Naruto wince slightly. The blonde turned to greet his brother only to get smacked up the back of his head with enough force to make him stumble. "You idiot," Izo exclaimed. "All you had to do was kick the shit out of her before she got too bad. But no. You have to be a prissy little fuckwit and give her enough time to pull even more chakra from her Baiju. Then Orochimaru's albino butt toy comes and almost kills her. At least you killed him, but now we are going to have to deal with somehow getting back into and out of Taki with the Jinchuriki, while the whole fucking place is on high alert." He raged loudly. "Are you done?" Naruto deadpanned. "The real question is, are you done? Perhaps you'd like to resurrect some super ninjas of the past and throw a mass destructive jutsu contest while you're at it. Because that's the only way you'd garner any more attention." The older teen took a deep breath and sighed. "Give me one good reason not to kill you and bring you back no less than 3 times I let you fight during one of your episodes," the blonde stated simply. Izo frowned as his shoulders slumped slightly. "Fine, I'll let you off this time. But seriously, you need to start realizing when to kick the living shit out of someone for the greater good of things. That jutsu I just used on her is going to hurt like a complete bitch once she wakes up, and as soon as I suppress my chakra again, I'm going to be just as much pain. You happy now? Your pacifistic tendencies have caused 2 people more pain than they should be experiencing." Naruto scoffed lightly. "Just shut up and suppress your chakra already. The sooner you get back to being somewhat sane, the sooner we can all ditch this village and be done with everything." He rolled his eyes as Izo moved his hand in a talking manner. "Where are the other 4 anyway?" "Other 5 actually," Izo stated proudly. "Let it be known that my doctor's degree was not wasted, as I am probably one of the few alive to successfully separate Siamese twins without any repercussions. I think. Anyway, they were not too far away just before, and judging by their chakra signatures, I'd say they're hightailing it out of the village as we speak." The mischievous grin on his face told Naruto all he needed to know. "You set a trap, didn't you?" he drawled. "Define trap." Naruto rubbed his eyes tiredly. "Will it potentially kill anyone other than them and or cause some form of major destruction?" Izo waved dismissively. "Nah, it's all cool. It should only target them, and it won't be destructive at all. Now, if you don't mind, I'm going to suppress my chakra now. Make sure to catch me this time." The blindfolded teen put his hands into a seal and took a deep breath as he forced all of his chakra, of which there was a surprising amount, back into his core. The process took about 10 seconds, after which the teen went completely limp and face-planted quite suddenly. Naruto grinned wickedly. "That's what you get when you yell at me." The blonde quickly ordered his somehow still alive shadow clone to grab Izo while he went and grabbed the girl. They needed to get out of the area before people came snooping. Keeping in mind that he wasn't supposed to be found out yet as the son of the Yellow Flash, he quickly flashed over to where the sealing scroll he had thrown had fallen. Picking it up, he bit his thumb and swiped it over a seal on the outside of the scroll and watched as every single Hiraishin kunai was warped back into the seal and the scroll simply wrapped itself back up perfectly. Sometimes the minor space-time seals were the ones that really made things easier. With the battlefield cleaned up sort of, he leapt off after his clone. Kakashi was having a difficult day. Contrary to what any sane person would assume, the villagers and Shinobi did not suspect him and his team, or rather the missing members of his team, of just attacking their Jinchuriki. No, they had actually assumed that someone had hired them to do it, and then thanked them for it. It was a disgusting and irritating experience for both him and his students. Apparently, the whole situation had even gotten to Sasuke in some way since the boy had glared quite openly at those who thanked him. Sakura was taking it pretty bad as well since she linked Taki's Jinchuriki's treatment to Naruto in some way, along with her own not really justified hatred of the blonde. She wondered if the people of Konoha would do the same if someone from another village simply went and killed Naruto for what he contained. The pink cat wasn't aware that Sasuke was having very similar thoughts on the subject, nor was she aware that the Uchiha was going through his own inner turmoil about his plan to use Naruto in some way for his own gains. Needless to say, the entire team was not happy with how they were being treated within Taki. Only a handful of people had reacted badly to the accusation of them killing the Jinchuriki, and those were Shibuki himself and some of the village council that didn't particularly like the idea of losing their weapon. It was a disturbing revelation to the two Genin as to just how ninja villages truly thought of those that worked for them. They were tools, skilled weapons at best, to be used and discarded without naught but a shrug. "Sensei, did they really go after Taki's Jinchuriki?" Sakura asked quietly. Kakashi sighed mentally. He couldn't even think of a logical excuse or lie as to why the two Uzumaki weren't with him currently, and he really didn't like lying to those he was supposed to mold into respectable shinobi. A habit of lying to your comrades was not a good thing unless you were Danzo, and even he wasn't all there in the head sometimes. I'm not entirely sure myself, but that does seem to be the case, the Jonin said calmly, making sure to choose his words with at least some forethought. Why would they go after that? How were they planning to go up against so much power? The pinkhead asked. The silver-haired Cyclops closed his eye in thought. It seemed he would need to reveal more than he was supposed to, but to be fair, the Sundaime had dropped an exceptional amount of responsibility on him with the Uzumakis, and he really wouldn't be able to help it if something got out sooner or later. It would be best if he were the one to explain things to his team instead of them finding out from someone less trustworthy who might try to use the situation to manipulate them somehow. I think that you two should know that Naruto and Izo aren't exactly Jonin, at least not completely, he began. Due to Naruto's condition, and Izo's artificial bloodline, the Hokage deemed it necessary to have them team together at all times so as to keep each other in check. More specifically, the two were trained exclusively on how to deal with each other's abilities at their worst. I can only suspect that Izo has been trained very well on how to deal with and take down a Jinchuriki using his Kekkei Genkai, he explained. Naruto, on the other hand, has more than likely been trained to harness and control the Kyuubi to a certain extent to reduce the risk of him losing control of himself on a mission. This was the reason that neither of the boys attended the academy. As they are now, I am not sure on how to rank their skill levels, but I can be sure that they are even more adept than I am when concerning Jinchuriki and anything else to do with them. Sasuke narrowed his eyes slightly. Why are they in this team then? If their skills are as good as you say, shouldn't they be eligible for Chunin or special Jonin rank? The Uchiha asked. Kakashi smiled. Konoha runs on the principle of teamwork, Sasuke, and the Sundaime is a firm believer in the practice as well. If I were to hazard a guess, I would say that the Hokage is trying to have the boys interact more with others their own age. Given both the boys' conditions, I would say that they would not be well accepted by older generations. The Jonin pointed to the eye under his forehead protector. There are also reports that say the Sharingan is capable of actually subduing and controlling Jinchuriki to a certain extent. The Hokage is probably putting a lot of faith in you, specifically Sasuke, as aside from Izo himself, you could turn out to be the only person capable of looking out for Naruto. The Cyclops had left out the fact that there were actually a few people capable of controlling Naruto within Konoha: Danzo, Tenzo, and Shikakunaru, to name a few, even if the latter was supposed to highly confidential information known only the two former and himself. The way Kakashi saw it, if he could get Sasuke to believe that the Hokage was putting faith in him, then maybe he could be able to ease the Uchiha out of his dream of revenge. It was a bit of a long shot, but if it worked, it would be extremely fortunate. Now he would just have to explain his plan to the Hokage and hope he wasn't smeared across one of the walls for putting such a ludicrous idea into an unstable Jonin's head. Sasuke seemed to dwell on the thought for a while as Sakura simply stared at the two in awe. The idea of actually controlling a Jinchuriki with a Sharingan was one of the most amazing things she had ever heard of. If Sasuke could manage it, then her complaints about Naruto having the Kyuubi's powers were null and void. There was a brief thought of her being married to Sasuke and Naruto being their slave and weapon to use, but her more logical side pushed that deep down into her subconscious. A slightly awkward silence filled the room as the door opened and Shibuki walked in with a stern and slightly upset expression. "Have the other members of your team returned yet?" the village leader asked emotionlessly. "I'm afraid not," Kakashi answered. Shibuki frowned. "Once they do, no matter their condition or any extra cargo, you will all leave my village immediately. You will all leave and never return here again. Takigakure will cease all connections with Konoha and deem any further attempts at diplomacy as an attack on our village. Isn't that a bit extreme, Lord Shibuki?" the Jonin asked. "Fu is my friend," the young man snapped. "Your village sent your team here to kill her and I refuse to simply let such a thing get swept under the rug, no matter how much my council is advising me to do otherwise." Shibuki took a deep breath. "Konoha has crossed a line and I will make sure that everyone knows of its crimes. My team was not given a mission that had anything to do with Taki's Jinchuriki, and if my two missing Jonin did receive a secret mission regarding the girl, I can assure you that neither I, nor the two Jonin here, knew about it. As of right now, we are not even sure if my Jonin attacked your Jinchuriki. Making such bold accusations and decisions based on the unknown is a sign of an unfit leader." And with that statement, Kakashi successfully silenced the room. "Tell me then, Kakashi of the Sharingan, just what else could have happened? What could have possibly happened to cause Fu to release that much of the Nanabi's chakra while also somehow keeping your students out of the village? If you have a better idea, then by all means, Please tell me. Shibuki's cold stare made Sasuke and Sakura rethink their original thoughts on the usually nervous and jumpy young man. One of my missing students, Naruto, is also a Jinchuriki. There is a chance that he went outside of the village to train in using his Baiju's power since you forbid us from doing anything within the village itself. His brother, Izo, would obviously be at his side to keep an eye on Naruto's well-being and to make sure no one tried to do anything. There is, however, also the possibility that this Fu also picked up on his chakra and went to investigate, which would explain why you cannot find her yet. To the Jonin's credit, that was probably the most well thought out and actually plausible lie he had ever had the audacity to put into words. Shibuki frowned. How do you explain the mist and reported commotion on the lake and around the tree at the center of my village? Kakashi shrugged. I'm not sure about that myself. Just out of curiosity though, have you searched for your Jinchuriki within the village? You know, to make sure that she is actually even a part of the incident. Shibuki smiled nervously. We actually haven't checked the village for Fu. She doesn't live here, so we don't usually have a good idea on where she is most of the time, he explained sheepishly. Your Jinchuriki doesn't live in your village? Sakura asked skeptically. No, she doesn't. The council and villagers decided a few years ago that it would be best if she was not allowed to live within the village. It's safe to say that there are only a select few within Takigakuer, myself included, who are actually friendly towards Fu. Anyone else would be hard-pressed to even see her in the village for anything other than a mission or when she tries to buy food. So you are willing to accuse us of targeting your Jinchuriki when you don't even take the necessary precautions to keep her safe? I hate to say this, but the Hokage will be most displeased when he hears of this. Reacting so badly to anyone attacking such a valuable asset to your village after you have so stupidly thrown her to the dogs is pathetic and shallow. It only goes to show your immaturity that you have allowed yourself to be bullied by your council into abandoning someone who you call friend. This comment, oddly enough, came courtesy of Sasuke, who was glaring at the village leader. No one was aware of it, but Sasuke had rather strong feelings on the concept of friends, even more so after learning of the secret of the Mangekyo Sharingan. One of the main reasons he kept his distance from people was because he didn't want to make friends lest he be tempted to follow in his brother's footsteps. Probably the most mature decision of his life, mind you. Emotional reclusiveness aside, the young Uchiha was very adamant about what it meant to be friends with someone, and he didn't like it when he saw others merely discarding those closest to them. It was probably a good thing he kept this to himself though, since Kakashi was likely to hug him for whatever ridiculous reason. You don't know what you're talking about. When you get stuck with running a village, then you can preach to me about how I run mine, Shibuki said irritably. I understand that the ninja villages are not a democracy. If you didn't want Fu out of the village, then you and you alone could have stopped it. The council is there to advise you, not to order you around, and the sooner you realize that, the sooner you can start being a proper leader. Sasuke was beginning to find it difficult to remain serious while Sakura continued to stare at him with stares in her eyes. Kakashi was impressed with his student's knowledge and outlook on things, a little concerned, but impressed nonetheless. He didn't know why Sasuke seemed so miffed about Shibuki's actions, but he really hoped it wasn't just because the man was a poor leader. The Jonin did have to admit though, even he was disappointed with Shibuki's lack of backbone. To be pushed around by his own council was quite pathetic. The Cyclops, much like Sasuke, made an effort to ignore his pink-haired student's current dreamy expression. Shibuki gritted his teeth angrily before storming out of the room and slamming the door. Kakashi sighed while Sasuke went back to brooding and Sakura just looked around in confusion, not really knowing what she had missed. Oddly enough, they all ended up thinking of the same thing. Where were the Uzumakis? When Fu woke up, she found her hands and feet bound by long strips of sealing paper that she could feel were slightly suppressing her chakra. Opening one of her eyes slightly, she tried to observe her surroundings without getting caught by whomever it was that had her tied up. The first thing she did notice was that she was lying down next to a small campfire and there was the smell of something cooking. Is that ramen? She thought skeptically. While she was pretending to be asleep, Naruto was busy cooking his ramen that he always had stockpiled in a sealing scroll, which was then sealed up into a very secure and blood-activated seal tattooed on his leg. Let it be known that Naruto Uzumaki took protecting his ramen very seriously, especially from Mizo, who he had also tied up for safety reasons. He was fully aware of the girl being awake, but he wasn't going to do anything yet. The blonde wanted to see how she reacted to her situation and be at least somewhat prepared in case she decided to try and go ballistic again. He really didn't want to deal with a raging Jinchuriki again so soon and without Izo, whom he guessed would still be unconscious for a little while. He wasn't planning on waking up his brother anytime soon, for the sole reason of he didn't want to deal with his brother's whining about using too much chakra. Naruto sighed. I wouldn't do that, he droned lazily. Turning around, he was met with the comical sight of the Jinchuriki trying to chew through the ceiling strips around her wrists. She was frozen in place, staring at him with wide eyes and her teeth clamped down on the paper. Overall, it looked like a really nervous grin in a really weird kinda way. Naruto actually took this time to observe the girl for the first time, making sure to file away his thoughts about her appearance for later consideration. I fucking knew you had a thing for dark-skinned girls, Izo exclaimed suddenly, sitting up quickly before literally collapsing back into unconsciousness. Naruto and Fu stared at the older teen for a few awkward moments before Fu turned to stare at Naruto somewhat fearfully. In any other situation, the blonde would probably seriously injure Izo and left him to crawl back to Konoha, but he needed his brother to be useful for them to get out of Taki should shit hit the fan in some way. Anyway, back to the girl. Naruto could only wonder who in their right mind would think that was enough clothing to count as proper covering. The female Jinchuriki was clad in a short white sleeveless midriff shirt with a slightly longer fishnet top underneath, long white armlets, and fishnet shorts with a short white apron-styled skirt over the top. Considering the small amount of material covering her torso, the 3 stab holes through it seemed far more substantial than they should have. Most of the white was also covered in a combination of dried blood and dirt, but that much was expected after a fight. The important question at hand was what Izo would have to say about her attire once he was awake, but for now, Naruto would worry about basic conversation. Don't suppose you'd be willing to tell me your name? The blonde asked tiredly. Are you going to tell me why I'm tied up? The mint-haired girl asked accusingly. Ah, yes, the bindings. That would have to do with the fact that the last time I tried to talk to you while you weren't tied up, you went ballistic and tried to kill my brother and me. Then you almost got killed and went even more ballistic, which led to our current situation, Naruto explained casually. The girl deadpanned at him. My name is Fu, and I'm sorry for trying to kill you. I think. Now would you please untie me? She asked hopefully, smiling brightly. No way in hell, Naruto said cheerfully. I am not giving you a chance to do something stupid and possibly draw even more insane amounts of attention to us than you already have. So, Fu, Jinchuriki of the Nanabi, you and I are going to have a nice little heart-to-heart before I decide what to do with you. Who the hell are you anyway? Fu asked, raising an eyebrow at him as if his answer would be unimpressive no matter what it was. Oh, right, introductions, the blonde muttered as he stood up and bowed deeply to the girl. I am Naruto Uzumaki, Jinan of Konoha, and Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Kitsune. Fu stared at him in surprise for a few moments. Oh, Naruto took his much-deserved facepalm with a deep groan. Tuya gasped for air as she surfaced from the pool of water, quickly followed by Sakan, Ukon, Kitamaru, and Jirobo. The twins were in the best condition overall as they had only used their curse seal as a power boost, Kitamaru being only slightly worse than them as he had used it to heal a few nasty injuries. Jirobo and herself though were easily in the weakest condition out of all of them since she had forced herself into the second stage too fast and had wasted all of her chakra to just dispel a genjutsu while Jirobo had to regrow his legs. The 4 crawled out of the water and collapsed within the secret entrance of Taki. They could all honestly say that they had been utterly humiliated in that fight against the old Uzumaki, and they knew that no one in Otogakure would let them live it down for a long-ass time. Their defeat and humiliation, however, was only one minor little problem compared to what they were really trying to escape from. I can't believe that they did that. The redhead breathed out heavily. I know, it was humbling, Jirobo agreed. Lord Orochimaru is going to be real upset when he finds out that we failed this badly, Kitamaru complained. Out of the 4 of them, he had received the all-round least severe ass-kicking, if only because he summoned his spider to take it for him. Sakan and Ukon remained silent as they, along with the others, all thought back to what they had witnessed when they had chased after Izo. It was one thing to realize that Kimimaro had been defeated by the blonde, which only went to show how outmatched they were, but to watch the blonde restrain a raging Jinchuriki while Izo completely subdued it was another thing entirely. Just what the hell had Orochimaru been thinking when he sent them after 2 shinobi that powerful? Better yet, did Orochimaru even realize how strong the Uzumakis truly were? There were simply too many things that had gone wrong for this to be a simple result of lacking information, which probably meant that their master had used them to test his old experiment in some way. It was an uncomfortable thought, but it was the only one that really made any sense to any of them. The worst-case scenario would be if Orochimaru had simply sent them to their deaths knowingly, but even he wasn't that wasteful. The snake Sanin would be more likely to use them for an experiment if they were no longer of any other use to him, not send them to be butchered. Welcome to my parlor, said the spider to the fly. A disembodied voice said, echoing through the small cave and sending a cold chill up the auto shinobi's spines. As he winked at the creature with his beady little eye, it continued in a sing-song tone. He assured the little bug he wasn't going to die. And the poor little fool never got to say goodbye. The Sound Four slowly turned their heads to stare fearfully at a grinning Izo as he sat calmly on a raised slab of earth with his legs crossed. They watched as the ground under him, them, and a good portion of the entire cave glowed a bright purple with a large intricate seal. The world twisted and contorted, their stomachs doing much the same in terms of sensation. The cave gave way as everything warped into a large bleak room with several chains and shackles linking them to the ground, Kitamaru obviously having the most. What the fuck is this? Let it be known that Tuya was not easily stunned into silenced. I thought it was pretty self-explanatory, Izo said as he stood up and walked over to them. This is my parlor, and you are all welcome to it. Think of this place as the limbo between the cave you were just in and a place that I don't know, although statistics dictate that the other side leads to a volcano somewhere. Can't know for sure, but since none of the other guys have ever come back to complain otherwise, I've elected to go with the hopeful ignorance approach. I get the feeling that you aren't just going to let us leave, are you? Kitamaru's blank stare was enough to know that the spider-like boy was already sick of being restrained so easily. Got it in one. Congratulations would be in order, had you actually figured out something important and not so obvious. However, I am not without mercy. Well, at least something I consider close to mercy. You four have two options here. One leads to what I assume is certain death, while the other leads back to the cave and your freedom. Maybe, the older teen said in a rather flippant tone. We're at the mercy of an idiot, Sakon stated bluntly. That we are, brother, that we are. Ukon had been privy to the fact that the chains they were in stopped them from separating in any which way possible. It was infuriating to have the same person forcefully separate him and his brother at one point while forcefully keeping them as one not long after. What do we have to do to be released? Jirobo asked with narrowed eyes. It's simple really. First you struggle, then you fight, then you break, and when it's over you'll be mine to take. The useful ones anyway, he explained with a shrug. Unlike your master, I prefer not to simply waste things that aren't up to my standards. With that being said, I also don't like to use things that serve literally no benefit to me whatsoever. So, how you do in here will determine whether or not I see you as useful, and also determine whether or not you even get out of here. Izo sighed deeply. I was kinda hoping to catch that albino one in this as well, but my brother has claims to what happens to him now. The best I can do is hope that at least one of you losers prove to have potential, then I'll see where things go from there. At worst, I'll have wasted a considerable amount of chakra on this seal for nothing, but that is easily overlooked. You're sick, Tuya yelled angrily. How would Konoha even let you get away with this kind of stuff? Isn't your village against the torture and unnecessary mistreatment of enemies? Izo gave her a look as if she was stupid. Have you never heard of the T&I department of Konoha? You know, the place that homes Aviki of the Iron Maiden, the snake mistress of Konoha, and Inoiki Yamanaka, the latter of whom is known for tearing information directly out of people's minds. Compared to the stuff those guys do, this is a playground. It's not like I'm demanding any and all information you guys have on Orochimaru or his associates. I'm merely giving you all a chance to survive as opposed to just outright killing you in a gloriously brutal fashion. The Uzumaki finished by quirking his head in such a way that it cracked his neck very loudly. How the fuck is that any better? You're just going to make us suffer until we prove that we can be useful, and even then, what makes you think that we would betray Lord Orochimaru? Tuya glared hatefully at the blindfolded boy. I'm with Red on this. We've already been trained on how to deal with interrogation, by the sickest bastard alive at that. If you think whatever you can throw at us will be enough, think again, Kitamaru said with a cocky smirk. Izo chuckled darkly. It's so cute when they think they're tough, he mused to himself. The Sound Four, or rather all five of them, hissed in pain as their chains went taut and held them still. Izo extended his hand towards them, a single purple thread of chakra flowing out from the tip of each finger. The threads moved over the short distance between them and each went to a different one of the children. The Auto Nin's eyes widened as the chakra threads stopped over where their curse seals were placed, before splitting into 3 points and piercing straight into each tomoe of the seal. The seals activated, sending each of the four's unique markings all over their bodies before their chakra flared and the transformations began. Each of them groaned in pain as they were forced through the second stage transformation of their cursed seals, something which they by all rights should not have been able to do twice in one day and with such a short amount of time between them. Somehow, the boy in front of them was able to force their cursed seals past the set limits, and apparently with very little problems on their side of things. Still, The lack of intense pain or death by chakra exhaustion did very little to distract them from the fact that they were being played with like little puppets. They had been under Orochimaru's orders for a long time, but the Sannin held authority through fear and power, and he wasn't able to simply force the cursed seals to activate, cause incredible amounts of pain, yes, but not activate. The chakra threads quickly receded once the transformation were complete. As it just so turned out, the result of both Sakon and Ukon transforming while remaining together was easily one of the more disturbing sights one could lay eyes on. Thank Kami Izo was blindfolded, sometimes he found that there were far more benefits to not seeing than there were otherwise. Anyway, with the transformations now complete, the chains holding them down went loose and they fell to their hands and knees. What are you doing? Jirobo asked in surprise. I figured that I'd give you all a sporting chance. For so long as you are within this little world of mine, you shall remain at your strongest, and your strongest is what I shall test. Izo chuckled lightly. Do take your time. I would oh so hate it should you befall unfavorable odds by being overly hasty. Or, if you so choose, race to your death as quick as you can. I promise not to hold it against you. For now, he said dismissively as he turned to seemingly walk from the room. Wait. Izo stopped and turned back to stare questioningly at Sakon. Yes? If we were to surrender ourselves here and now, would you accept it? The apparently more dominant twin asked through gritted teeth, gaining shocked looks from the other three and his own brother. Sakon. What the hell are you doing? Ukon hissed. Shut up. The only reason we even joined Orochimaru was because he promised me he could keep you safe. I won't take the chance of you dying over something as simple as allegiance, Sakon said harshly. The oldest of the room's occupants chortled. How sweet. And surprisingly effective at that. Tell you what. If you two, or even just one of you, manage to survive and pass my little test, I'll let you go anyway. Think of it as extra incentive to succeed, Izo said cheerfully before turning to the other three. You lot, however, are still on the chopping block so to speak. Should you fail, you will die, or something. I still don't actually know what happens on the other side of this world, Izo shrugged. Worst comes to worst, you get spat out somewhere randomly and you'll be left to do whatever you please. Personally I hope against that since I dislike annoyances coming round for a second time. So what the fuck are we supposed to do? What exactly is this little test you have for us? Tuya growled. Izo shrugged. Don't have a clue, sorry. Let's just assume that I wasn't really paying too much attention when I was putting this seal together, while also assuming that I pumped enough chakra into this thing to potentially tear a tiny hole in the fabric of space, time too, if it decides to get involved. Don't worry though, I am confident that you all have a chance to survive whatever challenges lay ahead of you, and here you can't be serious. Kitamura yelled indignantly. I think he is, Jirobo said hesitantly. Damn fucking right I am. Not for good reason though, Izo admitted offhandedly. An awkward silence filled the room as the Sound Four stared expectantly at a contently smiling Izo. So far, things were a little hard to completely comprehend, and given the circumstances, no one would blame them for thinking that it was all just a highly complex genjutsu. The idea of the crazy boy in front of them setting up a trap in the form of a seal that locked them in an alternate dimension for an uncertain amount of time to experience who know what kind of horrors, was ludicrous at best. The Auto Ninja were fairly certain that not even Orochimaru could string together such a seal. Hopefully. So. What now? Kitamura asked curiously. To be completely honest. My clone was supposed to run out of chakra by now. This is kinda embarrassing in a weird way. Wait. The older teen suddenly exclaimed as he held up his slowly dissipating hand. Okay, awesome, I didn't get the timing off by too much. Anyway, have yourselves a nice year or so in here. I'm going to go back to where I really am and beat the living shit out of my idiot of a brother. With a quick enthusiastic wave, Izo's clone simply collapsed into a small cloud of chakra, which was, surprisingly enough, consumed by the floor. Tuya snorted and turned to rant about the situation to Jirobo, only to find that he and the others have completely disappeared. The chains restraining her crumbled and released her, leaving her to look around frantically in slight panic. As she was doing this, the other 3/4 members of the Sound Four were doing much the same, except for Sakon, who for the most part was determined to protect his brother. The redhead stopped suddenly as her eyes locked onto herself. Standing a few feet from her was none other than herself. The other her seemed to be older, taller, and was also in the second form of her cursed seal, only it had become far more grotesque, having had extended her clawed fingers to creepy lengths and leaving her looking borderline anorexic. It was a disturbing sight, but not one that overly bothered the redhead. She had seen more disturbing things come out of Orochimaru's lab. Fucking perfect, she scowled. So let me get this straight, Fu began. You and your brother over there, We're sent here to see how I was being treated and take me back to Konoha if you deem Taki not safe enough for me?" she asked incredulously, the sealing tags binding her having already been removed. Naruto shrugged. Basically, there were some other minor points to the mission, and there was supposed to be a group of Anbu and Taki who were meant to give us an update when we arrived, but that's not important right now. The main thing is that we found you, survived your psycho rage moment, and are now asking if you would like to come with us, the blonde said casually. It was apparent that he did not completely understand the severity of just up and leaving one's way of life. Fu blushed slightly at the psycho rage moment comment, but, thankfully, her darker skin, and the general darkness of the night, hid that. "You are still going to take me back even if I say no, aren't you?" she asked. "Yeah, sorry, but we have orders. You'll be coming back with us regardless. I just wanted to know if you were okay with it since having you follow us willingly is far easier than carrying you all the way." "You know, trivial things," Naruto said. "Uh-huh, and what exactly should I expect in Konoha? Are you planning on taking me to make me a weapon, or does your Hokage plan on turning me into a breeding station for stronger shinobi?" Fu had heard a few of the Taki Council members discussing those particular subjects when she was younger. Becoming a weapon was not something she would be happy with, but it sure as hell beat becoming a baby-making station, even if she wasn't entirely sure on what that entailed. It was a very unfortunate benefit that female Jinchuriki were more effective in transferring special traits to their children, and one that had yet to be properly utilized. Naruto waved his hand dismissively. No. We're just taking you for safety reasons and also to bolster our military force. Aside from Suna, Konoha is the only one of the Great Five hidden villages that has only one Jinchuriki. I might be skilled in using my Baiju's chakra, along with other things, but even I don't hold much of a chance against two Jinchuriki at once. He stopped and handed Fu a bowl of ramen as he went about dishing up his own serve. At most, you'll be stuck training with me and Izo until you're deemed useful by the council. After that, well, it's really up to the old man for that part, but I'm sure that he won't force you to do anything you don't want to. He has a major weak spot for kids. The blonde snickered at the last part. That doesn't sound like pedophilia at all, the mint-haired girl said sarcastically. Crunch. Fu and Naruto both turned and stared at a now awake Izo as he casually bit into an apple. The older teen continued to eat the fruit as if he wasn't at all aware of the two's gaze, while also making sure to be as loud as he could in the action. "I hate you sometimes," the blonde muttered irritably. "I can feel the love, bro. It's surprisingly cold," Izo said cheerfully. I think I'm lost," Fu said unsurely. "Naruto here doesn't like apples, or any fruit or vegetable for that matter," the elder siblings explained. "He says it's my fault, but I think he's overreacting." "I think you're an asshole." Izo ignored Naruto and returned to eating his apple. Fu just watched on in confusion. She didn't know how siblings were supposed to get along, but this didn't seem quite right to her. Being so isolated from the people within one of the most isolated hidden villages was not a good way for a child to learn how to interact socially. Still, the two brothers seemed much friendlier than anyone else she had met save for Shibuki, and the idea of going somewhere with a clean slate, to a place where no one knew that she was a Jinchuriki, was a very tempting thought. The only real downside would be leaving Shibuki behind. Just out of curiosity, how exactly are you planning on taking me to Konoha? I can't see the Taki Council agreeing to just let me go with you, and even if they did, would I have time to pack some things and say goodbye?" she asked hopefully. Naruto grinned. "Sure, there shouldn't be any problem with that. Unless your village tries to take us down before we leave. The higher-ups get particularly eager to kill people who are capable of taking down their super weapons with such ease, and being in the middle of their village often looks like a perfect opportunity to them. Trust me on this, we dealt with something very similar not all that long ago." The blonde shuddered at the memory of how Karagakure had reacted after he and Izo had taken down Yagura. Needless to say, neither of them planned on returning to that village for a while. They wouldn't really do that, would they? I mean, Konoha is our ally and also the strongest of the hidden villages. They would have to be stupid to try something against their Jinchuriki, Fu argued. The Uzumakis both deadpanned at the girl. Stupidity is something that the village councils have in abundance and they throw it around quite eagerly too. The only time you can trust one of them old geezers to make a good decision is when it involves making themselves more money or obtaining more political power. The world is run by the stupid and powerful, or the greedy and powerful. More often than not it's the former, Izo explained. It's the main reason that the Great Five Shinobi villages have an actual Kage and Anbu. Democracy tends to get a bit iffy when dealing with military-based societies, Naruto added. Speaking of Anbu, where the hell is that team that's supposed to be here? I swear, if they're out getting drunk, I'm going to make them feel so much pain. Naruto raised an eyebrow at his brother. Didn't you say that you were going to be in pain when you woke up? I was actually looking forward to seeing you in agony. Oh fuck you too. For your information, bro, I am in pain, quite a bit actually, but considering it's nothing more than an annoyance, I've elected to ignore it. Izo stopped and stared intently at Fu. You, however, should definitely be in pain. That jutsu is not something that someone can just up and walk off from. Fu frowned at that as she thought over what she could actually feel. As it turned out, she couldn't really feel anything, which confused her slightly. Hey, Chome, is this your doing? She asked mentally. Yes Fu, it is. And now that you have finally realized that these boys are not here to hurt you, I have one thing to say. Chome paused to make sure that Fu was listening before continuing. Do not, under any circumstances, anger either of these boys. The one that holds my brother has enough power of his own to end you easily, even without using the Kyuubi's chakra. The blindfolded one was able to put you down and suppress 3 tails of my chakra as if it was nothing, and there is something about his chakra that I don't trust. It's just far too foul. Okay, don't anger either of them, be wary of the blind one, got it? Anything else? The girl asked cheerfully. Actually, yes, there is. When you get the chance, you should ask the blonde one if he's single. You could use the companionship and just look at him. Aren't those whiskers adorable? Fu cut the mental link as soon as Chome started squealing about how adorable little fox-tailed children would be. She really didn't need any more to think about at the moment, let alone demonic children. Everything going okay? Naruto asked curiously, making a note of the faraway expression on Fu's face. It didn't take a genius to know that she was conversing with her by Juwu, but it would definitely take a mind reader to figure out what was being said exactly. Speaking of, he would really need to figure out how to get some extra benefits from the Kyuubi. If Fu could sprout wings, then surely he could do something awesome as well, right? Fu shook her head. Yeah, everything's fine. Chome is using her chakra to heal me and block out the pain, she replied casually. Damn you Jinchuriki and your hacks healing bullshit. If it wasn't for the fact that I also heal quickly, I would probably kill one of you in jealousy, Izo muttered. Seriously, it's so unfair on us normal shinobi. Naruto stared blankly at his brother. Izo, you are the dictionary definition of everything not normal in regards to shinobi. Hell, the medics in STEM hesitate to even label you as human on your medical records. They even told me specifically that they would sooner call him a human, and he's a giant monkey. Izo wiped a non-existent tear from his bandages. I didn't know they said such nice things about me behind my back. I will have to reward them for such kindness. Naruto. I'm making a cake, said Blonde face-bombed at the older teen's antics while Fu simply watched on with wide hopeful eyes. Can I help? She asked/begged. Of course you can. Cakes for everyone. I hate my life, Naruto grumbled as he ignored Izo and Fu going on and on about all the different ingredients they were going to use in the making of the cake, which the girl clearly didn't know was code for what could only be called death by sugar. Many members of Root had learned to fear the cake, one had even gone insane and written the cake is a lie on the wall in their room in blood. Danzo had been less than unimpressed. This is not exactly what I expected to find out here, but I can't say that I'm unamused, Kakashi said in a bored tone, his trademark eye smile blazing full force. And how long have you been here? The blonde asked curiously. Oh, you know, the last few minutes or so. Long enough to hear about that little mission you have regarding the Jinchuriki, the scarecrow said casually. Naruto glared at Izo. Why the hell did you not tell me that Kakashi-sensei was here? I felt that such information was not necessary at the time. That, and I was otherwise engaged in figuring out how I was going to apologize to Kuro-chan when we get back home. What did you do this time? Naruto drawled. Izo grinned viciously. I may or may not have set up a seal on one of her pillows that would make her dream about praising the log. She had to learn at some point. Wait, you guys in Konoha actually praise log? I thought that was just some stupid rumor that everyone talked about. The disbelieving look that Fu was giving the three told them that now was not the right time to try and convert her. Anyway, back to more important topics. Would you two care to explain to me why you went off on this little mission of yours without telling me or giving me a heads up? Kakashi asked. And while you're at it, why not tell me exactly what the rest of this mission entails so I can decide whether or not I want to ignore it? Okay, our mission was to come here to Taki under the guise of a trade agreement meetings, track down the Jinchuriki, assess her situation within the village, and if need be, extract her back to Konoha by any means necessary. Naruto frowned slightly. We were also supposed to steal the hero's water if at all possible, but we sort of threw that idea out the window very quickly. Kakashi smiled. Okay then, I'm going to continue playing ignorant to all of this until it's time to cut our losses and hightail it out of Taki. Ever since that little show you guys put on with the Baijua Chakra, the whole village has been on high alert. It was difficult enough just to get my clones out here to find you. Either way, the council is not happy, and Shibuki is very upset since everyone is under the assumption that you two killed Fu here. I'd say we have until midday tomorrow before they really start to come looking for you guys, he explained calmly. Alright, got any ideas on how to get out of this without any unnecessary hassle? Naruto asked hopefully. The scarecrow shrugged. Not really, but if I were to offer any advice, I would probably suggest that you figure out a way of leaving the village that doesn't involve me and the other two. The Konoha Council will not take kindly to there being a political issue with Sasuke or Sakura, me too to a certain extent I suppose. Well shit. There goes plans 4 through 12, Izo grumbled. Why do I suddenly get the feeling that I am not going to enjoy whatever it is that you two will end up doing? Fu asked nervously. Naruto and Izo shrugged while Kakashi chuckled lightly. Well, if that's everything, I think I'll go back and prepare with Sasuke and Sakura. By the way, I might have been required to explain some things to them and put an idea in Sasuke's head that might go either way from here on out. I'll also be explaining to them what you two are doing here so that they don't do anything to Fu. Got any complaints? He asked. Not really. We were planning on talking to Sasuke at some point anyway, the guy really needs someone to veer him away from the whole revenge thing. We'll figure all of that out with the old man at some point, but for now I think we should just focus on teaching him some things so that he doesn't get his ass handed to him too fast. The blonde paused and looked at Kakashi questioningly. How is Sakura coming along? Surely she must have improved a little bit with the lessons you gave her. The Jonin sighed deeply. Afraid not. She is still far too focused on Sasuke and her looks to even listen to me half the time. At this point, I'm questioning whether or not it would be more appropriate to focus solely on Sasuke. He shook his head in disappointment. On the bright side though, Sasuke actually showed a redeemable quality back at the village when Shibuki was arguing with us. If we're lucky we can use that to our advantage. Yeah, one thing at a time for now. Let's just focus on getting out of here first, okay, Izo said irritably as he began to expand his senses. I'm picking up several signatures at the village entrance itself, numerous others all bordering the village, and a few all wandering around the streets aimlessly. I'd say we could easily slip by most of them, but going out the same way we came in is probably not an option at this point. It isn't us leaving that will be the problem, it's her, Kakashi said, gesturing to Fu. Shibuki has already stated that we can leave as a team, but he still thinks that Fu is dead. Should he find out that she isn't, he might not be so ready to let her go. I could fly out, Fu offered. I mean, I can fly, so why not use it? Yeah, but you need to use the Nanabi's chakra to grow your wings and we don't want anyone to pick up on it and track us by it. And does that mean that you're agreeing to come with us willingly? Naruto asked. Fu shrugged. May as well. It's not like I have much of a say anyway, so I might as well go with a more peaceful option. I always did want to visit another village anyway. Well, I guess that means that you get the fun job, Izo. Try not to cause any issues, the blonde said casually. I guess that means that you have everything settled. I'll disperse now, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Naruto nodded. I'd say be ready to leave within the next couple of hours. It's best if we aren't here any longer than that. Kakashi nodded and burst into smoke. How exactly are you guys getting me out? Like, if I can't fly out of here, and I can't just walk out, what's left? The dark-skinned girl was starting to wonder if the two brothers were always so vague and confusing. Although she was at least happy that Izo wasn't planning on killing her as he said he would. Looks like you and me are going to have a little bit more bonding time. Please do refrain from moving around too much though, I won't be responsible if I accidentally drop you, Izo said with a suspicious grin. Fu just stared at him with wide eyes. You can fly too? She asked in surprise. If he could in fact fly, then that meant that he was far more capable of taking her down than she thought. Her ability to fly was her ultimate trump card at the moment since no one else could follow her when she decided to fly away. Izo nodded enthusiastically. Sure can. It's a great ability to have when you're bored. Flying over the top of the bathhouses usually offers a beautiful view, so long as I don't get caught. That is, Fu suddenly realized what was suspicious about his grin. Don't mind him, he acts like this a bit but you'll get used to it. He won't actually do anything to you aside from annoy you, Naruto assured the girl. Fu just nodded as she very slowly moved away from Izo. She didn't know them enough to completely trust them yet, and he was kinda freaking her out more than anyone else had ever managed. Still, they were offering a way out of the village and to what they claimed would be a better life for her. It was overly naive of her to do so, but she honestly hoped that it was true, even if only slightly. Fu figured that even if she was turned into a weapon, so long as she wasn't hated for simply existing, it would be worth it. Kakashi paused in his reading as the memories from his shadow clone came back to him. Things seemed to be taking an interesting turn, and not necessarily for the better either. It wasn't a huge surprise that the Uzumakis had a secret mission, nor was it surprising as to what the mission entailed, but it was not exactly the best of things to simply drop onto his plate. The Jonin was lucky that Taki had taken such an unexpected response to the situation. With them so ready to let him and his team walk away with no issues, it made everything much easier. For now anyway. "Sensei, is everything okay?" Sasuke asked, noticing his teacher's sudden thoughtful expression. It had been around an hour or so since the Jonin had sent off some shadow clones to search for Naruto and Izo, something which both Shinon were awaiting the news on quite eagerly. It wasn't so much that they liked the brothers, but the idea of them being dead was very unsettling. Sasuke himself was particularly hoping that the two were still alive, since he really didn't want to be stuck with only Sakura as a teammate, and as far as he was aware, the Uzumakis were the only people that he knew he could properly compare his skills to without being hilariously outmatched or undermatched. Oh, the poor unknowing fool. Kakashi glanced up from his book. Everything is alright for now. Naruto and Izo are just fine, as is Taki's Jinchuriki, he replied calmly, his eye quickly returning to his book. Sakura's eyes widened. That means we can tell Shibuki that Fu is alive. Then he won't be so angry and we can finish the mission, she said excitedly. Sorry, but we won't be doing that, the Cyclops said, making both Shinon look at him in surprise. It seems that Naruto and Izo were given a mission from the Hokage regarding the capture and return of Fu to Konoha. I believe that their mission takes precedence over our own, which means that it is our duty to aid in the completion of their mission above anything. As far as I can tell, Izo will be responsible for getting Fu out of the village while Naruto regroups with us and we all leave the normal way, he explained. But what about the village relations? The pinkhead asked hesitantly. We're already on thin ice as it is. Considering how Taki reacted when they thought we had killed the Jinchuriki, I think they would be less than happy if we told them that we are planning on taking her back to our own village. Even those who don't like her wouldn't give up the village's weapon so easily, Sasuke evaluated. I think the Hokage already thought ahead on this, which means that he knew that relations with Taki were going to fall one way or another. At least this way we get something useful out of it. Sasuke is right. As it is now, Takigakure will never fully trust Konoha again after this stunt we pulled so boldly. Our best option is to take Fu with us now and cut off our connections to Taki rather than let our relations degrade over time. It's more difficult to deal with slow degradation of political relations than it is to handle a straight-out cut-off, the Jonin explained. What are we going to do? We can't just walk out with the village's Jinchuriki following behind us. To be fair, Sakura could make a valid point every once in a while. As I said before, Izo will be handling Fu while we meet back up with Naruto and leave the village. I trust him to rendezvous with us somewhere outside of the village with Fu, while also hopefully making sure that we don't draw any unneeded attention. I'd say that this mission has escalated to an A rank due to importance, although the risks are still rather severe should things go badly. With that being said, I suggest you two pack now and get what little sleep you can. We will be leaving within a few hours and I expect you to be ready. The silver-haired man emphasized his point by actually putting his book away. He was planning on getting a little rest himself, just in case. He had used quite a bit of chakra in making his shadow clones. Sensei. Just how skilled are they? Sasuke asked. Kakashi raised an eyebrow at his student. Would you care to be a little more specific on that? Sasuke clenched his fist. How strong are they, compared to the others of our class, compared to you? He elaborated. Well, I'd say that they are easily the strongest of the rookie Jinan, and each of them could probably give any skilled Chunin a run for their money, but compared to me? I could probably take either of them without too much issue, but even I would never be able to take both of them down together. Their teamwork is a little too good for that. But you already guessed as much, didn't you? You're curious as to how you match up compared to them, and to answer that I'd have to say mediocre, the Cycloptic man explained casually. The Uchiha grit his teeth at that comment, much to his sensei's amusement if the man's chuckle was anything to go by. Don't misinterpret me on this, Sasuke. You are still very skilled for a Jinan, but they have the advantage of having trained together for what I can only assume was a long time before this team was formed. Teamwork will more often than not trump individual skill and power, which is why Konoha makes teamwork a necessity in our Shinobi program. Sometimes, Sasuke, one's own abilities just aren't enough, and that's why we have friends, the Jonin lectured. Kakashi ended the conversation by closing his one visible eye and going to sleep. Sasuke walked over to one of the beds in the room and sat down on it. The Cyclops had given him a bit to think about, but he quickly put those thoughts away for later and went to sleep. Still, he couldn't completely disregard Kakashi's ideals on teamwork, nor could he ignore the obvious benefits of it. The Uchiha thought that maybe, just maybe, it was about time that he began to consider getting help in his goal, if only for the purpose of making sure that it actually came to fruition. Izo ignored Fu's incredulous expression that combined a little too well with a light blush as he wrapped his arms around her. Naruto for once got to watch on in amusement at one of his brother's idiotic antics, even if it was at Fu's expense. "Hug me back," the older teen ordered softly. Fu was hesitant, but in the end, she listened and wrapped her arms around Izo. "Good girl," he said as he ruffled her hair slightly and took a step back, thoroughly confusing the young Jinchuriki. "Wait, aren't you going to hold on to me while we fly?" she asked in confusion. Izo snorted in amusement. "Nah, that was just a pre-flight hug, you know, in case something goes wrong." "Well, I guess it's also because I just really needed a hug, and you needed one too, as well as acting as a sort of apology for bitch slapping me into a tree with your tail. That shit really hurt, you know, like real deep in here," he said with a hand over his heart, sniffling slightly. "I thought we had a connection, Fu, and then you went and did that to me. I don't even think I can look at you the same." Fu turned wide-eyed to a highly amused Naruto. Is he serious right now?" she asked shakily. "I told you, you'll get used to it. He should calm down a bit after he comes down from his chakra high. Maybe. Until then, just go along with things." It was clear that the blonde was not taking the situation as seriously as Fu was. "Okay, this is going to feel a little weird at first, so try not to throw up," Izo said cheerfully. The orange-eyed girl raised an eyebrow at the older teen, expecting him to do something to initiate the flight, but nothing happened. The sudden feeling of weightlessness put the disgusting feeling of butterflies in her stomach as she began to float an inch off the ground. Looking up at Izo, she saw that he too was just floating there with a grin etched on his face. Fu was impressed, amazed even, by what was happening. She knew that flying was not something that just anyone could do, and the number of people who could be counted on one hand, but to do so without something like wings was truly amazing. The question now was whether or not Izo could maintain whatever technique this was for long enough to get them out of the village and to the bottom of the cliff. Fu had her doubts, but considering that Izo was the one to suppress Chome's chakra so easily, those doubts didn't hold very much weight on her mind. "Alight, I'll meet you two somewhere out there with the rest of the team. Izo, don't get yourself into anything stupid while you're waiting and look after Fu to the best of your abilities. I'm gonna go grab Kakashi-sensei and the others," Naruto said with a wave before he burst into smoke to reveal another Naruto. The new Naruto shuddered before looking up to Fu, who was now much higher off the ground, and smiled before bursting into smoke and disappearing. "What was that about?" Fu asked curiously. "That was just him doing a long-ranged replacement jutsu. He sent a clone off to find the others a little while ago," Izo answered casually. Couldn't he just use that teleporting thingy he used when fighting me?" she asked. "Nah, that jutsu uses the Kyuubi's chakra when he uses it, which is fine for short to mid-range jumps, but anything too far and the pulse of chakra is too noticeable to the people around him. So, to counteract that, he uses the kunai markers as a medium between him and a clone to perform a long-ranged replacement. It gets kinda technical if you really look into it, and it always leaves you feeling like you were just pulled through slime, but it's effective either way," the older teen explained as he reclined himself in mid-air. "So what do we do now?" the Jinchuriki asked curiously. She was still trying to get used to floating so high in the air without her wings. Now we get out of the village. I suggest you hold on to something." Fu's eyes widened. "Hold on to what?" She cut herself off by clasping her hands over her mouth to stop the small squeal of surprise as both her and Izo began rocketing towards the waterfall. "Oh, calm down, Fu. Enjoy the moment," Chome said in amusement. "Shut up, Chome." Naruto shuddered as he appeared where his clone had been. That disgusting slimy feeling was one thing he really could never get used to. It was simply not right. It was still better than being detected by who knows how many people, but the lesser of two evils was still evil, no matter what benefits it had. Sometimes he wondered why his father had to die and leave him with a Hiraishin seal that was only configured for himself. Seriously, all the effort that Izo had to put into breaking the thing apart was so not worth the mediocre outcome they got. Shaking his head of those dead-end thoughts, the blonde leapt off towards where his team was, his shadow clone having relayed their location to him after it dispelled. Landing at the window of the room that the three were staying in, he quietly knocked on the wooden shutters. The shutters opened to reveal an eye-smiling Kakashi who quickly let him in and closed the window after him. Glancing to the side, Naruto saw that both Sasuke and Sakura were getting up quickly and collecting their stuff, even if Sakura was being rather sluggish about it. "Everything ready?" he asked calmly. Kakashi nodded. "Yep, we're all good to go. And the other two? Izo is getting Fu out of the village right now, we should be meeting up with them a mile or two past the village boundaries. It's best we leave now so we don't risk the chance of running into any of the council or Shibuki himself." There wasn't a real sense of urgency in Naruto's tone, but the others could tell that he was trying to get a move on as quickly as possible. Everyone froze as the door suddenly opened and Shibuki walked in with a stern look on his face. It reminded them that he was in fact trained to be a shinobi before he became the leader of Taki, as they should have heard any untrained person coming to the door. Sakura was nervous and now completely awake. Sasuke was waiting for something to happen, and Naruto and Kakashi were smiling in their own weird way as if trying to act innocent. "So," Shibuki began coldly, "not only did you lie to me about not having an ulterior mission in my village, but you also plan on taking Fu for yourselves." Had he been anything more than Chunin level at best, his glare could have been intimidating. Now, me, Sasuke, and Sakura only learned about this mission a few hours ago, so we weren't lying when we spoke with you. As for Fu, well, I can't really say that even I would be comfortable leaving her here in this village considering how everyone reacted when we were accused of killing her. Even you can't blame us for wanting to take her somewhere safer, Kakashi replied. And how do I know that you aren't just taking her back to Konoha to be molded into your perfect little weapon? How do I know that you aren't going to treat her as nothing more than a tool, something to be used and thrown away without concern? Shibuki snapped. It would still be better. Naruto muttered. What was that? The blonde glared at Shibuki. It would still be better, to be used and feel like you have a purpose for even a short time than to be ignored and hated forever. Fu has no one in this village, save for you, who honestly cares about what she does or how she is. If you were in her place, would you not want to take any chance you were given to be wanted by someone, even if it is only as a tool? We don't plan on making her a weapon, use her power when the time needs it, yes, but that is her duty as a kunoichi anyway. At least in Konoha she has a chance to have friends, people who will look out for her, and she won't just be sent off to live alone because of what she is. Shibuki's glare dropped and he sighed deeply. You're the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, so I suppose that you would understand Fu better than I could ever hope to. That being said, I want your honest answer. Will you be there for her? Will you promise me that you won't let her be alone anymore and make sure that she is looked after within your village? He asked. Naruto smiled at the village leader. You can bet on it. And if there's one thing you need to know about me, it's that I never go back on my word. He made sure not to mention that he had amended that particular moral code of his so that it didn't interfere with the well-being of Konoha in any way. It simply would not do for him to waste time trying to fulfill a stupid promise. Like trying to bring back a missing nin to the village, that was just idiotic and would never work out for anyone. Very well. I'll let you leave, but should I find out that you have not kept your word, I will personally see to it that Konoha is made an enemy of Takigakoer, Shibuki said sternly. We'll take your word on that. Anyway, we should probably leave now, our other teammate and Fu are already on their way out as we speak. Wouldn't want to keep them waiting unnecessarily now, would we? Kakashi said with a wave. Shibuki watched as the 4 Konoha shinobi all jumped out the window before he turned and walked out. He would have to visit Konoha at some point soon to check up on Fu, although he would probably do it under the guise of going to apologize for not hearing out the Hokage's trade agreement request. There were always far too many excuses to do things in politics, almost as if whoever invented the system had intended to use all the loopholes extensively. The young man would have a heart attack if he learned that Hashirama had made the whole thing on a bet from his brother. It was probably best that such information died with the 2 legendary senju. A hunched-over figure skulked around the 4 bodies of the root squad that had been in Taki. They hadn't been all too difficult to find, or even take out, which probably meant that they were a recon team for spying and information gathering. They had all been adequately skilled, as was expected considering their Anbu-styled getup, but they had all fallen quite easily. Their minds, however, were far more challenging to break. The strange seal branded on each of their tongues had proved to be quite a pain to even figure out, let alone remove. As soon as any of them even began to mutter a word about their mission, they would die. It was quite a genius system, if he did say so himself, since the risk of one's operative spilling information was drastically reduced to almost zero, unless there was a skilled seal user on hand. It just so happened that he was quite skilled with seals, not that it helped out very much. The Anbu were too well mentally conditioned for any torture methods and they were all but emotionless and tight-lipped when he tried any poisons or truth serums. The figure stopped and rustled a bit underneath his large cloak that covered his form. Removing a sizable scroll from underneath his cloak, he placed it on the ground and sealed away the body of the first of the Anbu before shuffling over to the next body. A sudden clang of metal rung through the surrounding trees as a shuriken was swatted away by a large segmented tail that extended out from underneath the hunched-over figure's cloak. The large blade-like appendage twitched slightly before diving down and spearing through the Anbu that had somehow managed to fight off the effects of his poisons, a truly noteworthy accomplishment. Sasori was not a man known for his patience, so it stood to reason that he had been a little hasty in taking down his opponents. He supposed he was also a bit hasty in declaring their defeat as well. The large metal tail withdrew itself from the now certainly dead man's chest and retracted back underneath his cloak. Once again placing his scroll on the ground, Sasori went about sealing away the next body. Leaving no traces was somewhat important, but not nearly as important as gaining information on whatever third party seemed to be interested in Taki's Jinchuriki. Pain would be very interested in what had transpired mere hours ago, and also in the meager amount of information he had managed to extract from the root Anbu. If his memory served him right, which it usually did, his old partner, Orochimaru, had mentioned someone by the name of Danzo several times. The only Danzo he knew of was the one serving as an elder council member in Konohagakure Corps, and if they just so happened to be one and the same, well, it would be valuable information either way. Sasori paused suddenly after sealing away the last of the bodies and glanced around to make sure he had not missed anything. With a quiet grumble, he returned the scroll back under his cloak. The four Anbu would be at least slightly useful to him as either spare parts or cannon fodder puppets. The puppet master began slowly shuffling away from the small battle scene, making sure not to leave any trail behind him. It was nearly time for him to meet back up with his partner, and much like his own dislike for being kept waiting, he refused to keep others waiting either. Still, considering who his new partner was, no one would really blame him for staying away for as long as possible. The annoyingly cocky brat had a way of getting on his nerves, and not just because of their contrasting concepts on what art was. The Mad Bomber of Iwa would make a much finer puppet than he was a living person if only pain would allow him to. Still, some very interesting things had happened during his little intel gathering trip. To think that the Nanabi was now heading towards Konoha of all places, it would certainly make their mission a bit more difficult to complete. Fu was getting more and more freaked out as time dragged on. The flight out of the village had been quite peaceful and enjoyable once she finally calmed down and relaxed. As it turned out, Izo was in complete control of her while in the sky, not that that made things all the more comforting. Anyway, they were both back on the ground now, or rather, sitting in the branches of some very tall trees awaiting the rest of the team to arrive. How Izo was able to manipulate both of their body weights so effortlessly was still unknown to her. They had been waiting for Naruto for nearly an hour now, but she couldn't really blame them for taking so long. Traveling on foot was always more time-consuming than flying, especially through forests. Still, did her fellow Jinchuriki really have to leave her with the not-so-mentally stable brother of his? Said older teen was the exact reason that she was getting more progressively freaked out, as he had seemingly been staring at her with his head tilted curiously for the entire time that they had been waiting. "Why are you staring at me like that?" she finally asked, her tone clearly conveying her irritation. Izo simply continued to stare while slowly tilting his head to the other side. "I've been wondering for a little while now, and I just can't help but ask. Does the carpet match the drapes?" he asked curiously. Fu furrowed her brow in confusion. What the hell did that mean? Now would be a good time to remind everyone that Fu has very little experience in social interaction or colloquial terms used within most societies. That being said, to her, it seemed like a very innocent question that she was perfectly capable of answering. I don't have carpet, or drapes for that matter. I never had enough money to buy either, not like anyone in the village would sell me any," she replied. Izo chuckled lightly at her reply. He probably should have seen that one coming, blind or not. Still, he was a little upset that the girl was so annoying about things, meaning that he and Naruto would really have their work cut out for them with teaching the girl. But, this did not affect his ever-growing curiosity about the girl. His question had been quite legitimate and he truly was curious as to what the answer was, much as he was curious about the same thing regarding Sakura. Really, was pink hair even genetically possible? He would have also asked Naruto, considering the boy's own extremely bright hair color, had he not known that the blonde was far too proud to dye his hair. No. Fu, I wasn't talking about actual carpet and drapes, I'm talking about your carpet and drapes, understand? He explained patiently. The girl frowned slightly. She really didn't have a clue as to what he was talking about. Even if she did, she wasn't sure if what he was asking was even a valid question. She was really starting to wish that Naruto was around. She was quite fond of the boy after their short talk earlier, and she knew that he would have explained things to her in a simple and understandable way. Izo, however, she was still rather wary of, if only because Chome kept commenting about the boy's foul chakra. The boy was simply too cheerful and crazy for her to consider a real threat anymore. The blindfolded Uzumaki sighed as he noticed Fu's still confused expression. With a wave of his hand, he got her attention and pointed directly at her hair. "Drapes," he said simply before pointing down at her crotch. "Carpet. Do they match?" he asked curiously. Fu worked her head curiously as she grabbed a tuft of her hair and looked at it before glancing curiously down at her crotch. After a few seconds, it finally clicked and she blushed bright enough for it to completely disregard her darker skin tone. With a very embarrassed expression, she looked up at Izo, who was still apparently looking at her curiously. She still couldn't figure out his actual facial expression with the blindfold on. I guess so," she answered unsurely. "You can check if you want," she offered innocently. Izo facepalmed as hard as he could and sighed deeply. "We are really going to have to keep you away from the public populace until we educate you on some things. Naruto would absolutely kill me if I allowed you to get used or misguided by someone in your current state, and Kami knows that he won't do shit about teaching you the birds and the bees," he droned. "You can teach birds and bees?" Fu asked in awe. She herself could persuade multiple species of bugs to her will, many of which she had contained within the large red cylindrical pack-like thing that she had picked up on a slight detour on their way to where they were now. She reminded herself to thank Izo for agreeing to pick it up later on. But still, bees had always been out of her capabilities and birds were just cool. Izo honestly considered putting the girl out of her oh-so-innocent misery. She was far too cute and unknowing like this, to the point where it was almost a crime to do anything other than show her the right way. The Uzumaki almost made a secret vow to help guide the girl to the light, if only it wasn't so agonizingly tempting to turn her to the dark side, the side with black trench coats and scantily clad women aplenty. He would make sure she wasn't completely tainted, but he was going to make sure that she didn't remain so hilariously innocent. "No Fu, you can't teach birds and bees." "Well, I guess you could if they were a summons, but I don't have either of those, so I'm not even going to bother thinking about it for now. Right now, I think you should just forget about what I asked. Don't tell Naruto anything, and explain to me exactly what it is that you had me pick up on our way here," he said while staring perplexed at the large red cylinder sitting next to the girl. "Oh, this is my hive. It's where I keep all my bugs. They're the only friends I've had over the years, so Shibuki gave me this to keep them all with me. Isn't it cool?" she asked cheerfully. The older teen shivered slightly. "Remind me to introduce you to the Aburame clan. They might declare you their queen, but it would probably be a good experience for you anyway. Can you control them?" Fu shook her head. "No, it's more like they listen to me when they feel like it. I can persuade them to do things for me, but it's up to them if they want to or not," she explained. The Aburame could probably help with that, if they think it's worth their time, and Naruto could probably convince Torine to give you some personal training. If I were you though, I would focus on physical training and learning some large-scale ninjutsu. Jinchuriki are always well suited for those kinds of roles on the battlefield," Izo mused with shrug. "Up to you, I suppose. We'll figure it out when we're back in Konoha." Fu relaxed up against the trunk of the tree they were in and closed her eyes. She may as well relax while she waited instead of worrying about unimportant things. "Hey Chome, can you sense Naruto anywhere near us?" Yeah. He and the others aren't that far away, perhaps another 15 minutes or so. I suggest you not talk to the one you're with until the others arrive lest he ask another vulgar question," the Baijiu replied. "Vulgar? What did he say that was vulgar?" "Never mind Fu, I'll explain it to you later, possibly after you have been taught the birds and the bees," Chome said with a slightly amused tone. "What do you mean the birds and the bees? What is so important about them?" the mint-haired girl asked curiously. "Trust me Fu, that is not something that you want me explaining to you," Fu huffed quietly and crossed her arms, much to Izo's confusion. Why did everyone need to be so unhelpful? Naruto glanced behind him to check on the rest of the team. Kakashi, as expected, was doing just fine and keeping up while not getting ahead of the blonde. As far as the Jonin was concerned, Naruto was now in charge of the mission at hand. Sasuke was also doing quite well compared to what a standard Jonin would manage. They were after all going at quite a decent speed. Sakura, however, was not keeping up at all. She was panting and sweating up a storm, clearly showing her lack of physical conditioning. Getting out of Taki turned out to be extremely easy, as in just walk straight out kind of easy. That didn't mean they felt safe about it though. The chances of them being followed out were still quite high, and without Izo as their censor they couldn't be sure of it. That was why they were running away from Taki. If any followers saw that they were leaving so quickly, then they would hopefully drop the chase without much trouble. It was also best to get to Fu as quickly as possible. There would still be quite a few people alerted by her using so much of her Baiju's chakra, and Izo was still only one person acting as her guard. With a sigh, Naruto slowed to a walking pace. It was pointless if they all caught up to Fu and Izo only to be tired and in need of a break. Izo, Naruto knew, would complain about having to wait even longer than planned. Judging from how far from Taki they had already gotten, the blonde figured that they would be finding the other two somewhere nearby. Taking a deep sniff of the air, Naruto tried to pinpoint at least one of their scents, or more accurately, just Fu's. Even after living with Izo for so many years, he still couldn't correctly track the teen. A small smile tugged at his lips as he picked up the girl's scent, which funnily enough smelled like peppermint. Naruto decided to keep that little fact to himself for now. "I've picked up Fu's scent. They're close by, so we can take our time for now," the blonde said as he turned and started walking in the direction that Fu was in. After a few minutes of walking, during which Sakura finally managed to regain her breath, the team finally came across a large tree with a smiley face carved into its trunk. Sasuke and Sakura stared at the carving incredulously, while Kakashi smiled at the immaturity and disturbing effectiveness of the marker. Almost anyone else who would come across it would assume it was made by children. The Jonin did take a moment to question Izo's mental age, but chose not to delve down that path lest he not like what he found. Naruto sighed deeply and looked straight up to see a grinning Izo and an innocently smiling Fu waving at the group. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki made a mental note to explain to Fu why wearing such a short skirt was not the best thing to do if you were going to be up above people. He was just lucky that it was still quite dark, so he couldn't see anything in too much detail, and hopefully she couldn't see his light blush. The blonde had no doubt that his brother was completely aware of what was going on and would never let him live it down. "Hey Naruto!" Fu exclaimed happily. "Hello Fu," he greeted with a small smile. "Would you mind coming down here now? It's time we get moving." The girl nodded eagerly as she allowed herself to drop from the branch she was on and land right next to Naruto. Izo grumbled something about not being properly noticed before he dived headfirst to the ground and landed in a handstand, showing off his flexibility. The older teen bent and twisted himself into a standing position, slightly unnerving Sakura and the usually stoic Uchiha of the group. It was around this point in time that Kakashi had pulled his book back out of his pouch and returned to ignoring the odd-like behavior of his team. "So what happens now?" Sakura asked curiously. I suppose heading back to Konoha would be a good idea for now. I'd like to think that Lord Hokage would like to have Fu within Konoha as soon as possible," Kakashi suggested in a bored tone. Now that they were out of Taki, he had no real reason to remain any more alert than required. "Did it not occur to any of you that that exact thing was the plan all along?" Naruto asked disbelievingly. Oh, Izo exclaimed childishly, waving his hand up in the air. "I thought we were going to kill some people assassination style, but then you went and got a girl involved and ruined everything." "Okay. Crazy homicidal blind child aside, I think now would be a good time to get going. The sun will be up in a couple of hours and we can keep moving for most of the day to make some good time," the Jonin suggested. Naruto groaned as he watched Fu glare lightly at Izo for his insinuation of her ruining everything. Of all the times for things to really start to look like they were going down, it just had to be after all the actually challenging moments were over. The Jinchuriki could just feel the headache-inducing storm brewing on the horizon, waiting for the most inopportune of moments to hit him harder than Kana did that one time that Izo tricked him into thinking she hid her jutsu scrolls in her underwear drawer. He would never, and he meant never, be making that mistake again for as long as he lived. "Let's go. I don't want to waste any more time out here than I need to," Sasuke said broodingly as he began walking off in the general direction of Konoha. Sakura and Kakashi followed after the Uchiha while Naruto and Izo shrugged and started following as well, although the blonde was slightly curious as to why Fu was walking so closely beside him. He chalked it down to her just not being as confident while out of Taki. She was kinda shy after all. A short distance away, an odd figure that somewhat resembled a misshapen Venus flytrap had seemingly grown out of the trunk of a tree. The plant-like construct slowly split open to reveal a man-like creature with green hair and contrasting halves. One side of his body was completely black with a completely yellow eye, the other being extremely pale with a somewhat normal-looking yellow eye. The pale side frowned as it watched the Konoha team leave with the Nanabi Jinchuriki. The black side merely narrowed its eye ever so slightly. "It seems that the Nanabi has been taken out of reach for now. Pain-sama will be displeased with this news. Perhaps it would be best to let Sasori take care of telling him," the white half said in a light and somewhat childish voice. "For once I agree with you on that. Pain is not, however, the one we should be concerned with for now." Madara will be interested in knowing about the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and this brother of his, as well as Konoha's sudden interest in another Jinchuriki, the black half said in a gruff voice. The white half somehow pouted independently of his opposite half. I do hope he doesn't blame us for this, it grumbled quietly. Don't be childish. No one could have accurately foreseen this turn of events, it would be pointless to blame anyone. For now we shall report our findings, what Madara chooses to do from there will be up to him, the black half growled irritably. Okay, but I still want a snack on our next trip. You haven't let me eat anyone for days now, the white half whined. The black half wished it had a visible mouth so it could sneer. Perhaps if you weren't so committed to devouring the bodies of the weak, I would allow it. Such things are below us. Very well. Maybe we should give Kisame a taste. Sushi is supposed to be quite nice, the white side mused cheekily as his body began to sink back into the tree. Don't even think about it, the black side warned before they disappeared into the tree completely, any and all traces of them even being there no longer existing. The air directly in front of where they had been began to shimmer and contort on itself until a woman with a familiar purple striped Anbu mask was standing on the side of the tree. A faint red glow from one of eye holes in the mask quickly faded as she glanced around inside. It seems you were telling the truth, Itachi, she muttered. You had doubts? said Uchiha asked, appearing in a nearby tree. Could you blame me? Kana asked with a light-hearted glare. Itachi didn't react. I'm sorry, he said simply. Don't be. It's good to see you again, the woman said sadly. It's good to see you again as well. Mother Omake, why there are so many loopholes in Shinobi village politics. Hashirama Senju, the recently elected Hokage of Konoha, tapped erratically on his new desk in a very irritated fashion, a small frown etched on his features. Before him was his brother, Tobirama, who was watching on with what could have been called amusement had anyone truly known how to read the man. It is pointless, brother. You have been chosen to lead this village, and to do so you must give up your selfish vices and personal wants for the betterment of the village for everyone, Tobirama said with a barely noticeable smirk. He was enjoying watching his brother suffer. But it's not fair, the wood user whined pathetically. They call me the Kami of Shinobi. Does a god not get to do whatever he wants? No, Tobirama answered bluntly. Responsibility to your people comes first and foremost. The Shodai crossed his arms and huffed, spinning on his chair so he was facing away from his brother. He furrowed his brow in thought as he tried to figure out a way to do what he wanted, go out gambling, without getting in trouble for neglecting his duties as Hokage. It wouldn't have been this bad if he wasn't expected to set an example for the other quickly forming Shinobi villages, but as it was now, he was required to be a good role model. Had he have known that accepting the job would be the equivalent of being locked in a prison of expectations and paperwork, he would have sooner fed himself to one of the Baijuo. Brother, I know exactly what you are thinking, and the answer is no, you cannot make or change the rules so that they allow you to do whatever you want, the white-haired Senju droned. What if I just change them enough so that I can use several loopholes? The Hokage asked hopefully. Tobirama snorted in amusement. Hashirama, not even you could adjust the rules of an entire Shinobi village to allow enough loopholes to get away with doing whatever you want. What would happen if the other villages adopted such a system? Then all of the leaders would make use of the loopholes. Well, that's kinda the point of it, the wood user stated. I'll just make sure to make plenty of little loopholes to hide the big ones, all of which will have no truly threatening potential unless used consecutively and in multiple patterns, by which point the user will be found out and dealt with, he mused in a very pleased tone. Hashirama's brother simply stared at him curiously. Just how much thought have you put into this? He asked. Hashirama let his shoulders slump down as he hung his head in shame. I have had several hours of boredom, he admitted. Tobirama scoffed and crossed his arms. Well, despite your forethought on the subject, such a thing is simply not possible. The system would collapse before its first year, he said with certainty. The Hokage grinned mischievously. Wanna bet on that? He asked innocently. Tobirama narrowed his eyes suspiciously at his brother. Whatever was going through the fool's head was clearly not good, for him at least, and he really didn't want to get on the wrong side of whatever deity of luck that seemed to hover over his brother. Keeping that in mind, Tobirama was still very confident in what he had said about the system his brother was proposing. Rules built on loopholes structured upon even bigger loopholes would never last or be dependable for any village. Very well. I bet you, Hashirama Senju, that you cannot create a viable system of rules for the Shinobi village of Konohagakure that will not only hold up law to a reasonable standard, but will also maintain enough loopholes for you to manipulate at your whim, the Senju stated calmly and clearly. The water user was extremely confident that he was going to win this stupid little bet. And then maybe his brother would finally take his advice on running the village a little more seriously. The man was powerful, but political issues were definitely not the wood user's forte, or anything else that required a proper amount of thought for that matter. He had this win in the bag. A year later, say it no say it. Absolutely not, Tobirama, you lost fair and square, so now you have to say it, Hashirama said childishly. Tobirama glared at his brother. As it just so turned out, Hashirama's system had worked, flourished almost, to the point where it was ridiculous. Sure, it helped that only those that truly read all of the rules word for word knew how to make use of any of the major loopholes, but it still shouldn't have worked out so well with such little effort. Unfortunately, Tobirama knew that he had lost the bet and as such had to concede to the winner's claim. Now if only his brother had have asked for something simple, like his lightning blade. Say it, the white-haired Senju grit his teeth. I tremble before your magnificence, O great and powerful kami of Shinobi, he whose existence in this world is but a gift to his peasants beneath him, he growled out, his eye twitching madly. I love you too, brother, Hashirama said with tears of joy streaming down his face. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a very important date with a new gambling den in the village, he called out as he leapt out the window of his office. Forgive me, mother, father, but it appears as though I will need to kill him, for the greater good of everything, Tobirama muttered before following after his brother. It would be several more years of a crazy and unstable political system before Hashirama finally did pass on, by which point the system was so integrated into the village that it was near impossible to alter in any significant way. From then on, Tobirama made a point to never bet against anyone that so much as reminded him of his brother in any way at all. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.